What's up, everybody? I've been waiting all day for this podcast. No, honestly, I really have. I know most of the time I'm just like coming on doing a podcast, but I'm excited specifically to talk about Jimmy Koppel or James Koppel. I know almost nothing about coding, programming. So I thought to myself, let me bring on a guest who I can speak with and learn something for once. And while doing research for James himself, I see a lot of interesting hobbies from calisthenics to martial arts. There's even a SoundCloud page, so we're gonna have to talk about all of that. Hopefully, people with IT information, with programming knowledge, come and ask questions. Obviously, this is what the show is for, to call in and talk about stuff. After we're done with James Koppel, who's going to show up in a few seconds, then I'll have to bring him in and invite him as a guest and all that stuff. We're going to go ahead and talk with Raj, a great friend of mine, about politics, the recent candidates coming up for the election. We have some new news right now. Trump got indicted again by DC now. So we got two. Let's go for a trifecta. 3 indictments coming up soon. Very, very exciting. On top of that, we're going to talk about Hunter Biden shit. We're going to talk about what's the one thing we're going to talk about. There was another show on Rumble where the host of the show live on air recognized that they're a part of a cult and that Senor Trump has been scamming them this whole time, which is always super interesting. I mean, I'm totally down for it. People who recognize, oh shit, I fucked up. Oh shit, we've been following this guy blindly for all this time, giving him the benefit of the doubt for everything, and kind of waking up out of that. And I think it's interesting to analyze that relationship. Now, James Koppel is a dynamic figure in the world of software development, right? I think he teaches. I think he lectures sometimes at MIT. He graduates of MIT. He's very passionate about making tools more accessible and impactful. So I cannot say how excited I am to talk to him. And there's some tweets he's made that are just super interesting. Something about comparing systems to laws, and we're going to discuss all of that. For anyone watching right now, I know, let's get hyped. I see Pangburn in the chat. Everyone else, obviously, who's watching, get hype. Send people the link. Let's get people in here watching, because the more engagement we have, the better it's going to be. So we have another 2 minutes. What can I blabber on about until he shows up? Oh, it was my birthday this past week. I don't know if anyone knows. So this is like post birthday, like dead energy. Like, I feel like birthdays much of the time just become work at a certain point, right? You want to make sure to go out. You want to make sure to celebrate with people. You want to make sure that people feel like we're celebrating our birthdays, because some people really want to. But then I'm like, oh man, I need a vacation from this birthday. You spend more money. Oh, Jimmy is in the chat. I see him just entered. Hey, you can hear me, right? Can you hear me, Jimmy? We might be having a little bit of technical issues in the back end. Let's see why I don't hear him. There's a loading sign for your camera. Well, wait till he comes in. We'll fix any of these technical issues. But I do see him in the chat. Going once, going twice, going thrice. Very interesting. Maybe if I transition the scene, it's going to work. Hello? Oh, he's sending me a private message. Let's see. Hello? Yes. I see you. Very interesting what's happening. This worked fine for everyone else. I wonder what's the issue going on here. Can you hear me? I think you can hear me. Let's try to work this out while we're talking right now. Maybe try to log back out and log back in using a different browser or something. Sometimes that works. I mean, but you're like the IT expert, so I don't really know. Um, not IT programming expert. Okay, no connection. I think he's backing out and coming back in. As always, this is just what ends up happening with the world of trying to do things online. Mhm, mhm, mhm. Yes, it is. It is very ironic. You are correct. Humanity is super ironic. Okay, so it says there's no connection at this point. Let me kick the speaker so he might be able to rejoin. We'll see what's going on here. Okay, let me Felicia. If I know you're there, maybe you could message him and see what's going on directly. Let me generate a new. No, make sure that the guest link is the same. I'll send it to Felicia, and we'll see what's going on here. La la la. Oh, oh, I can hear you. Yes, but I can't see you quite yet. I can hear you though for sure. Always get technical difficulties. Maybe that has to do with it. I see you have a little cog. Oh, I see you. I mean, you look great, so I think you're clear. Let me bring you on camera so the audience can see you. Ah, there he is. Everyone can see you now. Fix the back. I feel you. I get the same thing. Like a room divider is always the way to go.
All right. All right. Guess
Well,
I'm all set up.
well, what's up? How's your day been?
It's, yeah, I'd say it's. What has happened? I think it's not that eventful. I just had a nice workout before I came here.
Oh,
Still a little
yes.
sweaty.
That's actually something I wanted to talk to you about. While doing research, no, by the way, this is going to be like, this is not like a serious interview. It's a discussion. And we want to keep it open and friendly and flowing. And this is how I usually do the show with anyone that comes on. So, to start off, I'm a total noob when it comes to programming. So I thought speaking to you would be the greatest opportunity to learn about it and then have it explained so people who are not, experts could understand it. Secondly, I did see there's videos of you online practicing calisthenics, and like gymnast stuff. Is that what you were doing in your workout?
So, well, actually, no, normally it would be on Tuesdays, but because I have a bit of a cold, I stayed home. But actually, yes, no, I went to a park and was practicing handstand pirouettes.
Ooh, okay, fancy. How long have you been doing that? My younger brother is really into calisthenics as
Um,
well.
Say it's longer than I care to admit. Because all right, so I've been doing it gymnastics for almost 8 years, but I don't have the skills you'd expect from someone who's been doing it for 8 years. I
Okay.
both learned very slowly and been spent a lot of time injured. But
Yeah. People get a lot of
thanks to
injuries
a
from
lot of
working out
things,
improperly. Yeah. Sorry.
not. I mean, I think. Um, so I once did I'm trying to remember what it's called. There was a website that takes 23andMe and looks for specific S&Ps related to sport and fitness.
Okay.
And a number of the alleles they looked at, a number of the S&Ps they looked at were related to how injury prone you are, and I had most of them.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know they can do that by just looking at your genetics to see how injury prone you are.
Yeah, I don't know how strong the research is because I read some things saying like, oh, well, people used to look for single genes or single nucleotide differences that could explain things, but really the interesting differences are caused by all your genes and it's
Exactly.
compounded
Yeah.
fashion.
Yeah.
So like I do know that's like physical therapist tells me I have more elastin and collagen in my joints, which is why I'm like the only. I think I'm one of two males on the MIT gymnastics team who can do a front split.
Okay. In the video you did a split in one of the videos online, which I found just amazing.
Thank you.
So I is this like a is this a so you're obviously passionate about it. You've been doing it for 8 years. Um, or is this just like a thing that you do on the side and it's not really like your main?
I mean, there was a point in my life, like actually just like year and a half ago, when I wanted to make it a massive part of my life. But having, you know, it's been like the last 6 months much more focused on a company, and
Hmm.
so definitely missing a lot of practice.
I see. So this company, what's the name of this company you're currently working
Yeah.
on?
So my current company is called Mirdin, Mirdin. We are
Hmm.
the code quality company. So we help turn software engineers into superstars.
Yeah. So explain exactly what you mean by that. Turn them into superstars.
Yeah. So we are a training company. We do courses and coaching and private workshops. That's and so I'll tell you about a few of our case studies.
Okay.
On so let's see. I worked with one guy who came in. He rated himself about a 3 out of 10. Looking back, and that's there was a ton of going on. Kind of gets like now he's one of the best around manager. To often understand things people don't. Had another guy who says he got 2 promotions in 2 years, which like usually like one promotion every 3 years is more common.
Hmm.
Um, but I'd say for me, one of the most satisfying is it was this Russian guy Alexander, and when he first came to me, he said like Jimmy, like I feel like the other engineers on my team are like talking about like something deep, and I just don't get what's going on. Like some language they have that I don't.
Okay.
And after taking my course, spoke to him again a few months later, and it's like, Jimmy, I'm at peace. I get it now.
You get it. Do you find that a lot of like the underlying thinking behind programming is philosophical in much of the sense?
On yeah, often quite directly. I mean, so within the readings I give to people, a few of them are essentially philosophy readings. So, um, so for instance, when people talk about when people try to design data structures, so right, so say so say like take any entity like you want to model a business and like look at
Okay.
different types of businesses and how they relate to other things. You have to decide what data needs to be associated with each business for your for your needs, and you're essentially creating a view on the world. And there's some very fine grained reality, and you have some coarse approximation of that. But whatever you do, it has to match up with the reality. You have to, so to say, carve reality at the joints. And so I actually do give people like a reading, not Plato directly, but one based in Plato called Carve Reality at the Joints.
Okay. And what does that reading entail? Because I saw on your blog you have like how ancient philosophy can help us understand
Oh
programming.
yes, that one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a different thing entirely.
Okay. Okay.
We can get there too. We can go there too.
Yeah, I will definitely. Philosophy is my minor, so I
Mm.
majored in psychology, so I definitely want to explore the aspect of how philosophy intersects with programming and being a
I mean,
superstar programmer.
I can tell you some about what ideas say with ecology as well.
Okay, go for it. Go. So let's start with the philosophical readings and how they relate to programming itself.
Um, okay, so I'm just trying to think of what other things we discuss are more in lines of pure philosophy. Um, also, so I read a newsletter. I think it was like earlier this year or late last year called "Think About the World or Let the World Think About You." And
Okay.
it came from a big debate that we had with some of my former TAs. Actually, basically what I'm just saying about ontology versus phenomenology.
Okay.
On on so yeah, so the approach I just mentioned of kind of like trying to think when you're designing your program, trying to think deeply about the world. Um, Dog barking in the background.
That's cool.
Trying to think deeply about the world,
Okay.
uh, and figure out what it is, and then how you're going to carve it up into data structure. On And a former TA, he's Benoit, who's like, no. What you should instead do, and is let's see. So you start with the things you need to do, and then you look at the world and you see where like your rough model breaks down. You know,
Okay.
example, the classic example being, well, say what's someone's address, and
Hmm.
you can go on fine with them, a person just having an address, until you get to someone who has a separate shipping address and billing address if you need to both ship and bill. And you're like, oh, my concept and address is wrong, and it breaks down, and you're fine in this way.
Okay.
And this actually draws from a book from the 70s by Terry Winograd, which is like, I believe it was this concept is telling you about like using this philosophical breakdown to decide that someone should have a separate shipping and billing address. Like, I believe this lineage comes from Hegel, if I remember correctly.
Okay. What exactly are you referring to? Like this breakdown. So like I'm modeling reality and like in the code, for example, in the programming, I find myself taking an address. A person has an address, but now this person has two different addresses, right? So is that what you're talking about? Like where the phenomena in the ontology connect, like the way in which I describe it, the semantics, the language I use to explain it, and
Yeah,
as applied to the code?
yeah, and I think it's a decent summary. It's like your code has a view of the world, and on. So I think what would eventually conclude from the discussion is that the ontology of phenomenology or the ontology versus requirements approaches are kind of like getting the same thing two different angles. Like, so you start by thinking, well, what is an address? An address represents, a place in some government's created system of
Hmm.
locations and a grid that's social for someone. Then what you do with it? What do you say? Like a person has an address. Person has an address. All right, what are the operations we do in addresses? We ship things, we build things. Oh wait, there's a problem here. But so it's they think they kind of both end the same destination. So as a classic example, it's like you might think of your social security number. Your social security number is something that's social with a single person. It's unique and it doesn't change.
Okay.
But it's a line from Martin Fowler that if you mistype in my social security number with my wife's social security number, then it's neither unique nor immutable.
Because you
So,
can mistype it.
and then you have to change it, and then you have
Hmm.
or you have this period where you have two of the same person, and you can. So, if your system doesn't allow people to change social security numbers, then someone types the wrong social security number and they're screwed. And that actually, something relevant to this. I still have a couple of Yahoo.com email addresses.
Okay.
Ever ever since Verizon acquired Yahoo, and Yahoo basically died 7 years ago, I've been trying to get rid of them. 7 years later, it's still an ongoing project.
Okay.
And there are a few things I've realized that I'm going to have to give up. Like, I am probably forever going to have to continue. Probably going to have to forever continue paying Verizon/Yahoo $40 a year to keep these email addresses forwarding to my new current inbox. So one of the reasons is with Instacart. I think they built in the assumption that if you
Hmm.
log in with Google, then if you log in with Google, then that account is permanently associated. The only thing to be associated with your Google account. And if I want to delete that account and then move a different account to use my Gmail address, I can't. And that really sucks if you ever say have an account and then one day you accidentally hit the sign in with Google button instead of logging into your email. And now you have two
Interesting.
accounts and you can't ever merge them. So that is an example, real world example of someone getting similar to the social security number example I just gave of someone getting it wrong in a way that is indirectly contributing to me paying $40 a year for the rest of my life.
Okay. So that's interesting because I do find myself more and more having to rely on signing with Google. I just don't even have the option to stop doing it in some situations. Like even with EVMux, the program we're using right now, once I did the sign in with Google, I cannot sign in with any other account. I literally have to make sure
Yeah.
I go on a different computer. I have to open up private window, sign in with my Google, then go into EVMux and sign in with Google, which is interesting. Okay, and that's kind of where this problem. That's where the breakdown happens, right?
Yeah. And so you can kind of get this realization that like you should not have this permanent binding between the Google account and the person. You can get it through two directions. Either by thinking about the requirements and knowing there's a breakdown, like it's like why would someone should change it, like when it's mistyped or other circumstances. Or you can think about it from an ontological perspective, as in it's like both case of secure number examples you just say is like, what is this thing? Social security number. Wait, no. It's not a social security number. It is a number that person typed in a website, which they said was a social security number. They're not the same thing.
Okay. So reframing that as it's not of the person, rather just a thing that they typed in, and making it open to changes and stuff like that.
Yeah. So when you realize, like, it's the very famous painting was called on Deception of Form. I don't know the exact name, but you probably know it. It's a picture of a pipe, and below it says "Ceci n'est pas un pipe."
Okay.
Butcher French, I'm sure, which means this is not a pipe because it's not a pipe. It's a picture of a pipe.
I see.
If you're looking at Wikipedia, it's not a picture of a pipe either. It's like a reproduction, a digital reproduction of a painting of a pipe.
Okay. So other than so in the code, this like illusion of what it really is, when you think about it as the illusion itself, like this is actually a person's social security number, this is actually a person. What in the code, what in the programming, what like other than just forcing someone to pay $40 for Yahoo, like what does that mess up on the programmer's end or on the website's end or on the service's end?
So in this case, as long as you're forcing the world to conform to you, as long as you're saying like you are living in my world where this email address is always associated with one account where the social number could never be changed. As long as you're forcing people to live in that world, then it doesn't. But suppose you want to leave that world because you have customers who mistype their social security number and you want their business, then you have to modify your world to fit the external reality.
Okay.
And it is very easy for the assumption like a certain thing is unique or immutable to creep into weird places. So it's like, so I don't know enough about how the Gmail integration would work to know what problems are going in there, but I can imagine the things the social security number, which is you might store it in more than one place because you assume it could never change. There's no problem in duplicating it. And, well, you have a thing where one day it's your stuff works. The next day you log in slightly differently, or it's a server outage. It reads from a different place.
Okay.
Suddenly, you just assume these two numbers are the same, but actually only one of them changed, and bad things happen.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's switch this over to maybe a different topic. I was looking up, and at one point, I think it was on your blog or something, you said that your life's mission is to reduce the global cost of software maintenance by a factor of 100. First of all, where did the inspiration come from? And what is your motivation at all for like this business coaching for engineers?
So, yeah, so say like perhaps the greatest thing that happened to me is that a lot of people go through life kind of searching for their life mission purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically woke up with it one day. It was in May of 2010. And I think I was only finishing my freshman year of undergrad, but still I had seen enough stories online about things being done the wrong way, needing to be rewritten. And I just woke up one day and realized that the world does not know how to write good software. And ever since then, I've been obsessed with the problem of changing that.
How does the 500 language problem connect to this?
Yeah. So all right. So let's take a step back. So
Yes.
we want the world to have better software. So how do you do that? You can write new software better and you can fix old software. Okay. So we probably need both. How do we fix old software? But you can send people, you can train people, go to do it, or you can build tools. Okay. Let's try to build tools. And a problem comes up pretty quickly. Once it builds tools. So you build a tool, well, it has to be for a specific programming language. And So let's see if you can remember these numbers. So one year, it's a lady named Jean Samet
Mm-hmm.
published a paper trying to profile like all the languages that were in use, and I think she cast her net a little broad, included some things which she used in like a couple of projects, research projects, but she found there were, I think it was 198 languages in use. The year this paper was published was in 1971.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
And Gene Samet is one of the creators of COBOL.
And Koppel is a language. I take it.
Oh yeah, it's language
I mean,
or family language. It's a
yeah.
bunch of
I'm a total
languages that are
noob, so you're gonna have to
trying
remember
do
that.
one. So, I mean, COBOL made the news a few years ago when the governor of New Jersey, I think it's like about August 2020, the governor of New Jersey put out a call calling for COBOL programmers to help maintain some of their systems. I think it might have been related to pandemic benefits.
Okay.
And a lot of people are like, "What? COBOL's still around?" And hell yeah, it's still around. It's if you take a random piece of code that's in production, like if you take all the programs running in production, then you put all their lines next to each other in one giant blob, and you pick a random line, good chance it lands in COBOL. So the Social Security Administration, yes, the COBOL is a language was the business language of the 60s and 70s and later too. The Social Security Administration has about 200 million lines of COBOL. The joke is one line for retiree. This guy gets this much. This guy gets this much. A very large fraction of paychecks in the country are processed by ADP, which is Next Advanced Digital Processing, which they're say a few years ago. It's their company was running on the assembly language for old mainframe, but it, they then, I believe, okay, I'm not sure this deal went through or not, but they at least were in talks with a company run by a friend and mentor of mine to automatically migrate their code to COBOL. So anyway, just pay. So your Social Security benefits are going through COBOL. Your bank's going through COBOL. The airlines are running on Sabre. That's the scheduling system.
Mm-hmm.
So your boarding pass and your plane tickets and your luggage are going through COBOL. Your bank's going through COBOL. Your insurance going through COBOL. The last important thing is you're going through COBOL.
What's the security risk of that? Is it easily like I just don't understand enough of what is the difference between COBOL and these other languages that is like, oh, this is so old and ancient.
So I still have never written a line of COBOL. I mean, most people, very few people my age have, but I definitely have looked at it more than probably 99% of people my age or younger.
Mm-hmm.
So in most programming languages today, if you have two numbers, A and B, and you want to add them and get a number C, you write C equals A plus B.
Okay.
In COBOL, you write add A to B giving C in big English letters, with the idea that if you make everything take 3 times as much space and use stuff that looks like English, then it makes it more business friendly or something.
Okay. So that's it. Just really just the way in which you notate it on like the command, like in the whatever it might be.
So in the syntax is different. So the thing is, there are a ton of different COBOLs that were written over the years. They have kind of similar syntax. There's a lot of difference between them. So, I can tell you a few other things about them. One is that they're very heavy on go-to statements.
Okay.
Go-to. Let's see. So let's explain go-to to someone who's not encountered it before.
Yes, exactly. I just imagine it's you do something. There's a certain line of code, then it goes to something else. Is my initial intuition.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
So it's a lot. It is a lot like if you're following, say you're like following, in like a manual for something complicated, like repairing an airplane, and you just on the middle of it, the page it says now go to page 42, line 7, continue there. And imagine doing that as a robot who just, jumps that middle of this other page with no context and takes it very literally. It's
Okay.
like, if you insert a page in the middle, now page 42 is something else. Okay, it's not quite that bad. But you can imagine, it's like you say, now go to page 42.7, and like, it's that's part of the instructions assumes assumes that you have a certain kind of wrench handy, and then its next line says, now grab the wrench and blah, 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 and you have the wrong wrench.
I
So,
see.
it's
Because of all the context that was in between that you missed.
yeah,
Right.
so that's an illustration of how GoTo works. That's in contrast with a thing called subroutines, which have mostly killed GoTo.
Okay.
That's where you write a standalone operation, like you write instructions for things like here's how you replace this piece. And so instead of saying like go to this page and go to the middle of the page and keep whatever gear you have around to do this, you can just write now follow the instructions for replacing that thing. And it does not assume such context.
Okay.
And then also, and then the other thing is that you will also come back to what you're doing after just replacing the thing, whereas your robot following instructions and it says, go to that page and do this. There has to be another instruction telling you to go back.
Okay. So with all of these different languages that do all of this differently, what is like are there tools that make it possible to like move between these languages?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, so the mass automated migration, it is a thing. It's a very old thing, in fact.
Okay.
So there are a lot of tools that do these at different levels. It's different amounts of quality, and so I mentioned earlier the company that I don't know if you went through was in talks with ADP to port their old mainframe code over to Koppel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the company in question is Semantic Designs, where I spent a summer in 2016. So I'm quite well prepared to talk about their work, where they have built custom tools to migrate a lot of languages. I'll tell you the story of perhaps their most famous migration, which is so. Did you know the Army, Navy, and Air Force all have their own football team?
Yes, I did know this.
Oh, yeah.
I did know this.
But do you know why?
Because they're different branches and they have like their different.
Because they can.
Because they can. Okay. I like that. Okay.
You know the Army, Navy, and Air Force all have their own programming language?
No, I did not know this.
Why?
Because they can.
Because they can.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's not quite accurate to say it's like programming language belongs to them, but there are certain programming languages that are used in a lot of defense stuff and not much else. So, Ada is a more famous one, which is, I believe, was pushed by the Navy in the 80s and
Okay.
still in use. Another one that's more obscure is called Jovial. So, let's see, what was in Jovial? Well, the one time I've heard someone other than me or Semantic Designs talk about Jovial, it was my friend's sister who was working for Raytheon. It's like she's like, yeah, our radar system is so old it used to be in Jovial. So I guess Raytheon's radar stuff used to be in Jovial, or it's a radar thing. I'm sure they have a lot. I don't. Think some of the Aegis systems, like shipboard missile defense, were in Jovial.
Okay.
For this story, have you heard of the B-2 stealth bomber?
Of course I have. Of course I have.
Yes, and I mostly know it because if you play Civilization 2, which is a game I loved as a kid.
Oh, I love Civ.
Bomber. Yeah, if you get a stealth bomber, its icon is clearly a B-2. It's so the B-2 was written in Jovial, and so the B-2 is built in the 70s. They cost on average over $1 billion a piece, and when your critical systems, you need to test the whole system. It's like you can't entirely trust the compiler, you can't entirely trust the hardware. So it's like they'll buy a big box of chips, and they'll test the entire system using these chips. And then every time they need to replace a chip, they would draw from that box, and eventually the box runs out. But
Okay.
you still have your stealth bomber. You still in operation. So what do? You can. It's a few choices, but the nicest choice is to be able to upgrade to newer hardware, which sometimes also means replacing the code and upgrading to newer programming language. So
There's some hardware that's not compatible with different code and software, obviously.
So I'm not clear on all the details that led them to this decision, but like there are emulation things you can do. You
Hmm.
can like make old code run in new hardware, but it's generally not as good as making replacing with new code runs in new
Hmm.
hardware. So Northrop Grumman wants to get their plane off Jovial and into a newer language like C. So they decide, all right, we're going to get a team. We're going to get a bunch of people, and they're going to port our code from Jovial into C. And they try it, but it's too tough. Then 9 months, then give up. Then they say, well, maybe you can build some kind of tool that does this automatically. And they tried again, and these guys are really good at building airplanes.
Not so good at building tools
Yeah.
to port
So
code. Okay.
the third time, they call Semantic Designs. Semantic Designs comes in. They're never allowed to look at the code because it's classified. And they put
Interesting.
about 1.5 person years on it, building a Jovial to C translator. And finally, so they ship over the tool, they port over the code, they port over all the Jovial code to C, and then they translate. They have a little bit of assembly too, and they hand translate that. They put it together, and then they bring it into a big simulator, and the simulated plane crashes. But
Okay.
of course, the few hundred lines of translated assembly were the problem.
Okay.
The 100,000 lines, or is it, I think actually million lines of automatically translated Jovial, where they'd never seen the code they're running on, worked perfectly on the first try.
But it's the hand ones that are the ones that are
Yes,
messed up.
they
Okay.
fixed it. It was a simulator. They fixed
Okay.
it. Yeah. So and that's why our nation still has operational B-2 bombers.
What are the like overarching implications of all these different languages? Like, does this make it like I can't imagine doing research, or I can't imagine doing anything with other nations and having to consistently translate from English to German to Chinese to to Japanese to Hebrew even. Are the limitations in coding languages the same? It just makes it like little
So
enclaves and like
So a good analogy I've heard is that learning many different computer languages is not like learning many different human languages.
okay,
It's a lot more like learning the rules of a complicated board game.
okay,
And most professional programmers, especially these days, will know many different programming languages. Some of a lot of software systems are written in multiple programming languages. Um, this might have a single company that has like well over a dozen languages in production. So, like at Facebook, I can tell you, Facebook is famously polyglot. They have code, like they have a lot of stuff in PHP, and now more to their own language called Hack. Of course,
hmm
they have JavaScript and TypeScript, like everyone else. They have C++. They have Java. They have Shea Scheme. They have Haskell. They have OCaml. I think they have some Erlang. They have a lot of different languages that people might think are pretty obscure, but well, you've got one of the biggest companies in the world using them. Then on top of that, you have the fact that we have all the banks and insurance companies and other people who are writing software in the 80s, and many of the systems are still running. It's written in old languages, very much alive. I already talked about Koppel, also got Perl,
hmm
and let's see, the Visual Basic, and other things that were a lot more popular 20, 30, 40 years ago.
Is there a demand to update these software languages? Is there a demand for these companies to change it, or there's no like what is happening in the specific demand field? What's happening there? Like, what are the tools that new programmers or new engineers need to have, or the skills to make them successful in this field, other than just learning language or code or whatever it is? Because it sounds to me
So
like other outside of the tools, it needs to be like a real abstract understanding of how these tools operate, how these languages work.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've it's so I've written real like non let's see, I've been paid to write code in 30 or 40 languages, and if that sounds like a lot, um, I once had a personal training session with a guy who was on the side trying to with a guy who was both a personal trainer but also works as a programmer and was trying to write software for personal trainers. And he told me he has me beat. He's worked in over 40. So it is. I mean, it's very possible to learn a vast amount of languages, and but the thing is, like going out there and focusing on learning new programming languages, it is something that more junior people tend to think about a lot. And so, like at some point, it is just expected that if you've been programming for a bit, then picking a new language is not that hard. Like you start a new job in a new language, just you learn on your own in your first few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the more important things are the deeper things, especially the things that I focus on my teaching about abstraction, modularity, the implementation interface distinction. It's and how to sequester the spread of assumptions.
What does that mean? Sequester the spread of assumptions.
So it's So I'm going to read you a line from my most recent blog post, The 11 Aspects of Good Code. Let's see. Minimizing use of knowledge is a path to evolvability. Secrets are but the extreme known only to their owners. Every use of knowledge ties the program to the world that was, hindering the creation of the world that could be. For every datum, there are the components that create it, the components that use it, and those in between that merely deliver it. Do those components pass data along like a sealed package, or are those couriers prying into its contents? A value is passed from one end of the program to another. Every function on the way that calls a value an int is another barrier to making a float. And every function on the way that calls it anything is another barrier to turning this value into two numbers. The physical world is full of irreversible changes. Build a building and the townships around it, burn it back down, and forever shall the wind be tainted with its ashes. But when it comes to reshaping the world to bits, the only thing in a programmer's way is himself.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, so I said in there, it's line, like it's like even this tiny thing, it's like passing around a piece of data from one place to another. When you do that, so you give it a name, and you've imposed the idea that this is a single value as opposed to two values, has already been that decision, that thought has gone from your mind and been fixated into the code. If you were to change your mind later, the current code does not look like what it would be if you're writing it from scratch. And so, either you find the place where this thought entered the code, that's work, or you don't, and now the code is still is going to fall short of what you would wish it would be, of how it would look if you had done it this way from the beginning. That's why I say that's like every time your thoughts spreads to code in a new place, it is tying the code to the world it was and hindering it from the world it could be.
Those can be. So it's almost as if just like thinkers build models of the world. And once they understand a certain way, if that model you have to change something about it, stops making sense in a way. Does code play the same way once you create it?
It's
You
much worse.
Okay.
So, Jay, can you give a concrete example of a model that you're thinking of when you said that?
I would think of something as simple as understanding a specific dichotomy in the world, like there is good and there is bad. For example, your whole world is built out of this notion: there are good actors and there are bad actors.
Okay.
All of a sudden, you start introducing different variables.
All right. So now imagine. Okay. So imagine this model of the being good, the economist's Manichaean world. Imagine that was an executive model that you teach to someone and they forever go through life trying to categorize people as good and bad.
Hmm.
Naturally creates a lot of strife. Then you have some ancient Greek comes up with the brilliant, shocking idea that you can't just say A is good, B is bad, and call it a day. Now imagine if you wanted to end the strife, you have to go back. You have to go back, grab everyone in the world, bring them back to their preschool tutor who taught them in the first place, and then reprogram them.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
So one of the examples that I use kind of illustrates how difficult taking back an assumption can be is with sockets, with electric sockets.
Okay.
So if you've traveled much, have you bought like adapters between
Yes, I
plug different
have.
countries? Yeah,
Unfortunately, I've bought these adapters and have lost these adapters countless
yeah.
times before my trips to Europe and other places. So,
Oh no. Yeah. So last year I went to Japan for the first time, and I was
hmm
told in Japan they use the same plugs as in the U.S. And I got there and discovered that actually they use they use the two-prong plugs that are in the U.S.
different voltage or different amperage.
Same voltage. It's like in the U.S. everyone used to use the two-prong plugs before we switched to mostly three. And
Hmm.
of course, like my electronics had assumed the three-prong plugs, so it was a lie.
Oh,
And then I'm like, okay, well, I know that the three prongs plug is called the Type B plug, and the two prongs is a Type A. So I need a Type B to Type A adapter. And I did. So I bought one, and it didn't work because in Japan they don't call it a Type B; they call it a Type A3. But anyway, that is personal frustrating tangent. So imagine what it would take to change the world to all use one kind of plug.
oh, it would be an insane project.
Yeah,
It would be almost impossible.
it would be
It would,
like a
it would have to
significant
take
fraction.
years and years and years to
It
do
would be a
such a thing.
significant fraction of the world's GDP.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, you need to find every old electronic and change it. Possibly change the internals. Possibly just change the plug.
And then the
And
factories are going to have to change their
yep,
production. They're going to have to change their
yeah.
tools and their
Then
suppliers.
you have to go into a lot of old buildings, and you have a lot of old buildings and change those out. And you need a long transition period where you have things that are able to work with both. So it's not gonna happen. The thing is that in software, it's not as visible, but things are moving. There's a lot of very easy ways to move things in that direction. So earlier I mentioned Sabre, which
Hmm.
is an IBM built family of software systems that powers that powers airlines. On so so if you printed a boarding pass and you look at your name, there's a pretty good chance that there is no space between your first name and your middle name.
Okay. Because the software just doesn't allow to have that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is that fact is a direct consequence of IBM charging per byte in the 60s. So so say when you fly an airline, and then you go to the airport and you change planes to a different airline. Their software systems are passing in significant information about you. And you might think, well, like they're just passing like my name, my destination, my luggage. That's what I would think too. But I talked to someone who worked with airline software, and it's quite a lot more complicated than that. These formats are so complicated that essentially, even though there's different software systems, they all have to work the same because otherwise they couldn't be compatible with each
Mhm.
other. And so these things become extremely difficult to obtain. And so, yeah, so with ITA software is a company that's is now Google Flight Search. That's so it was founded. It was an MIT spinout. It's founded in the '90s. They built the world's best flight search engine a lot of other websites were licensing from them before they sold to Google. And then they decided to build a flight booking system. And they decided that they were going to be able to try to do things which much better than any existing system. To be able to like have a new perspective and like, you would talk about a journey instead of a single flight as the main object. And they basically gave up trying to do it that way.
Okay. Why did they give up?
Because they had to integrate with Sabre.
Okay. Because they had to have that switch that enables them to. Okay,
yeah,
I see.
I don't fully understand. I don't fully understand why integrating with Sabre was so difficult. So it's like, oh, it's like this COBOL format. It's very complicated. There's executable code in there. I don't understand the full details. I understand like that's when you integrate with it, so many assumptions about how your system works have exposed to it that you just can't build a different model of reality than the one used by these systems built in the 60s, actually more in the 50s. Sabre is literally the oldest continually running software system. It's been in production for 63 years, since 1960.
So, okay. So I hear that. That just, yeah. Okay. So all of these programs interacting with one another, there's so many different variations, so many different switches, and just the logistical ability to change them all is even more difficult than changing the plugs, because you have to go back to the person who taught it to begin with or wrote it. Like, you have to go back to your kindergarten teacher in a sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, in the case of Sabre, I think it's theoretically possible. It's more theoretically possible that you have a handful. You don't have to go into a bunch of old buildings. You don't have to go into a bunch of old buildings. You just need like 100 different airlines to all upgrade the systems at the same time. But then there are other reasons why they're very hard to upgrade. But another example I use is with HTTP refer. That every time you go to a web page, you're sending a little bit of data to the server before it loads. One of the pieces of data is called the refer, which is the site you're coming from. So you click a link, and by default, your browser will tell the website what website you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And the refer is misspelled, which there's a missing R in there. Which, like, the word refer in English has 4 R's, but this header has only 3 R's.
Okay.
And so it was a misspelling made in 1988. In this case, in order to change that, there is not like a few central deployments of things that talk to the internet. Like, there probably are sensors and air ducts somewhere that are internet connected that you have to upgrade.
Wow.
And in fact, for another example, during the Y2K crisis, which, by the way, I can go into this as well. A lot of people think, people predicted doom in Y2K, that the world's going to end on New Year's, January 1st, 2000, because of all these clock systems, but it didn't. It was all overblown. That's not true at all. Like there were lots of tests where, like, people would try setting the clock to January 1st, 2000, and things would just stop working. It's like, it would have been very bad if there wasn't a years-long, experienced effort to fix it. And part of that effort I saw on Twitter as someone who talked about literally crawling through air ducts to replace devices
Wow, okay.
that had clocks that were going to overflow.
I'm thinking about AI for some reason. This is making me think of artificial intelligence, and is that something that could maybe help in this endeavor of trying to like bridge that communication gap? Would that could be used as a tool to develop these translations or whatever it might be, where like instead of having to go into the air duct per se, you'll just know that specific thing is going to have to be recoded to work with the air duct or whatever it is.
So I see a lot of software development as a process of looking at a piece of code, then partially reconstructing the history and thinking that was needed to produce it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you change the ideas, then you write new code.
Okay.
I see a lot of software elements that way. And so it is very labor and cognitively intense. So if you think of AI if you think of AI as like a magic button that's going to provide infinite amounts of cognitive effort, then it can solve a lot. But but that doesn't stop someone from having to physically crawl through an air duct to
I
replace a
see.
device that has hard coded old software in there.
Okay, because the device itself has a coded. Okay, okay, I see that. I see
Yeah.
that.
Like usually you don't want it to be very easy to have the internet's change the software running in the sensors, controllers running in your building's HVAC system.
Okay, okay. I want to maybe move this to a little bit different here. Scrolling through your Twitter yesterday or 2 days ago, and you made this really analogy that I am not following this analogy. You wrote down, when you change a system's assumptions, you need to update it downstream, and then you said in Massachusetts, any couple cohabiting after divorce as husband and wife can be found guilty of the felony of adultery. No comment is made on couples cohabitating husband, and you post section 40. What are you talking about? What?
Yes, that was yeah. So my partner is studying for the LSAT right now. Like one day, she just calls me up and says, "Jimmy, I found something really funny in in the law." Uh,
Okay.
so uh, yeah. So the context. Adultery used to be a felony in
Yes.
Massachusetts, punishable by up to 3 years. It was taken off the books in 2017 and 2018. Um, I don't know when they stopped enforcing it a long time ago. And then in I think this is the marriage law. That's a different section. It says there's a line saying couples living together in the same household as husband and wife or cohabiting after divorce shall be found guilty of adultery.
Yes.
So there's two things in there that kind of make this out of date, although only one of them fit in the tweet. The first is that they're guilty of adultery, but adultery is no longer a crime. So they're guilty of something that's
That's
not
the
a crime.
first.
The other one is like the line says living together as husband and wife. It's like that seemed like a very stable assumption that would be the same. Like that's the thing we're going to talk about. Couple living together, divorce, living together as husband and wife.
What do
Like
they mean by
I'm
that? Do they
sure
mean, are they
I'm,
sleeping together? Are they buying groceries together? Are they
um,
like what does
it
that? What does
just
that
is
even mean?
cohabiting, just literally just living
Okay.
together. Um, so it's like suppose you want to keep that in the books. Suppose you want to keep that in the books, but if you're writing that today and you did want to have that be the law, you would have to write it in a gender and sexual orientation neutral fashion.
True.
So that's a funny case of an assumption about how the world works that was seems really really rock solid when this thing was written, having been changed. And if for some reason you wanted to write that today, you would write it differently.
And this
But
relates to the same thing we just spoke about, code, where it needs to be able to change so it
yeah,
fits.
and,
Okay, like
and
the issue with the
this
social security number
this
or
by
whatever
the
it is.
way is an example of how an assumption leaked out subtly,
Okay.
because um, well, it's a it if you just were to like do a search, like a textual search of the law for everything that makes reference to the idea that all marriages are heterosexual, there's a fair chance you would not find this piece.
Hmm.
It's I guess you can search for husband and wife, but if you didn't think to search for those exact three words, then there's a fair chance you would not find this. So it's kind of indirect way that this assumption about how marriage works leaked into the law.
I see. And it's the same assumptions that leak into code and
Yep.
programming.
Yeah.
I see. I see. I see. Okay. We're kind of reaching towards the end of the interview, so I'm gonna maybe make this a little funnier. I read that you also like to receive emails from strangers.
Yep.
What is one of the funniest or most memorable emails you remember receiving that like you still think about and you just can't get over it or whatever it might be?
Let's see. Whew. So so this goes way, 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 way back.
Okay.
it's long before I even had a website, so it's not a direct response to this, but it is
It's
a
fine.
random email that I got that was quite strange. Is that when I was in high school, I was learning the Ruby programming language, and every other week there would be on the mailing list there'd be a quiz like here's like some cool fun problem. Different people would code it up in Ruby and submit it. And I participated in a few dozen of them. And I just remember like a few years later, it's like some guy in Egypt sent me an email in all caps, like really, really wanting my help in getting one of my solutions, this random fun problem working.
Okay. And did anything come out of that? Did you end up
No,
helping? Did you unmute? No, nothing. You
no.
just remembered being funny. Okay. And on top of that, before we get to someone, I think Daniel asked a question in the chat. I found you singing on SoundCloud. Did you have aspirations to be a musician? Like, what was that entire thing about?
Oh, you're probably it's probably my fan piece that I wrote for the novel Unsong by Scott Alexander.
Okay. What do
That's
you like about that novel?
oh yeah, so Unsong is a really good novel. It's published online serial format. It's about it's kind of alternate history where with was it Apollo? Yeah, I think it was Apollo 8. Okay, so you send the first rocket to the moon, but instead of getting the moon, it turns out that actually the moon didn't exist, and instead it crashed into a crystal sphere surrounding the world, and then that reverts things to being the world described in the Bible or the Torah, where
Oh, okay, that's funny.
suddenly the clouds are filled with angels, and let's see, and then people discover that saying one of the thousand names of God causes magical effects to happen, as
Hmm.
is actually preached in Kabbalah. So
Yeah. Are you interested in like Jewish thought, Kabbalistic thought, and the like?
no, saying I mean not really, but like this novel, although it's like a basically like kind of like a fantasy novel set in a semi-modern era with a magic system based in Kabbalah. It's
That's
actually
interesting.
uh,
That reminds me of what was that
I'll just
Japanese
say like
anime?
one funny thing to the story that I think will tell you a lot about the story, which is one of the major characters in the novel is the Archangel Uriel, and
Okay.
midway through the novel, Uriel confesses to not believing in God.
Interesting. I like that. Okay, that's cool. I consider myself. I grew up. I moved. I actually immigrated from Israel, and my
Oh,
family was very religious for a majority of my. So I myself pulled, like as it says, pulled myself out of religion. What is your experience with religion? What did you grow up as? Did you ever feel like it was forced
yeah.
upon you and stuff like that?
So I grew up as a Reformed Jew.
Okay.
Yeah, like I went to Jewish preschool. I went. Let's say I went to. I was bar mitzvahed, went through all that.
Same. Same.
And I think like in elementary school, I did go through some phases wanting to be very religious and learning a lot about Judaism. But as a preteen teenager, I basically became an atheist and kind of stepped away. But a little funny if that's grew up Reformed Jewish, and now my entire family is not. My parents became Reconstructionist Jews of them. My sister
Hmm.
is now married in. My sister went the other way and married into a very religious family.
Yeah.
Uh,
Today, my parents, or my mother at least, is very religious, very orthodox. There's a moment in my life where I myself was putting on tefillin every day, tzitzis, all of that stuff. So
yeah, it's like when my sister got married. I think my been in a it's, it was quite the classical synagogue where like no microphones in sight. It's
hmm
men and women in different sides. So I can only remember being in such a religious Orthodox place like once before when I was much younger.
Well, what do you think about that? I know this is I might be a little bit outside the comfort zone, but what do you feel about like fundamentalist religion, especially as it manifests like in society and the way they interact with computers and programming and language and all that stuff? Like, are there any things
Um,
that you see from religious thinkers or
yeah.
people who come in with these preconceived notions?
So I'd say it's not a very live topic for me right now. It's not a very hot button topic in my life right now.
Hmm.
It's yeah, it's I think I think it was more an emotion significant for me, like in like 2006 when the religious right had a lot of power in America.
Yeah.
I don't tend to think about religion very much anymore. So this question about um, a question about how religion and sex programming. Like I say, I don't know how much it does. I definitely don't. I work with hundreds of software engineers a year, and
It
I
just
mostly
doesn't
never
show
hear
up.
about religion. But I'll say one thing that's funny is that so mm, so one of my friends started hanging out with a group of nerdy Orthodox Jews in their chat
Okay.
rooms,
Hmm.
and they called themselves Black Hat Hackers.
Oh, that's cute. I like that. I like that. Black hat hackers. That's cute. That's cool. Do you okay. Before we move on to the question, because I think we're really at the edge of our time, and I've really loved talking with you. I also saw in one of your pictures that you were wearing a gi. Did you practice martial arts at any
I
time
did.
in your life? What did you
Oh
practice?
yeah. So before I started gymnastics, martial arts was my sport of choice. Um, um, I started doing taekwondo when I was pretty young,
Okay.
and getting to secondary black belts. Um, but like a lot of martial arts schools in America, too many of them, mine kind of treated it more like an aerobics class than
Oh,
a
so what
serious
what is
discipline.
called McDojos? You ever heard the term McDojo
Yes,
before?
I have, and I think I would definitely classify my childhood taekwondo dojo as was one of them. It's more
Okay.
focused on self esteem than on technique,
Okay.
and it's like so. In college, I took up Shotokan karate, and
Mm,
and the organization that I joined, the SKA, it's it's a relatively small organization, like 1,000 members. So chances are, if you've seen Shotokan karate, it was not SKA; it was one of the other organizations. But this
okay.
group is extremely serious and old school. So it's like something you have to do to advance. You go to special trainings where you wake up at 5 a.m., run 2 miles barefoot, and then you'll go to intense practice, such as by standing in horse stance for an hour and a half.
Oh God,
And none of that is exaggeration. I mean everything I just said very literally.
that sounds awful. Actually,
Build character.
have
Um,
you ever done like like hard sparring? I myself, I found a lot of similarities between us. I also, when I was young in Israel, I practiced judo, and then when I
mm,
moved to the States, I did Muay Thai, and I also did Shotokan karate for about a year. I don't think it was SK. I think it was we went to like a me and my older brother were always doing martial arts together. So my question is, did you do any sparring? Did you do any like fights? Did you ever touch other forms of martial arts as well, or just really
yeah.
Shotokan and Taekwondo?
So so the other two martial arts that I've practiced are Western classical fencing.
Ooh, that's
So
cool.
so if you see fencing, most likely you see what's called Olympic fencing, where it is very much a sport. It is very much a sport. They have their electric gear, they have the rules, you care a lot about points. And classical fencing is treats it more like a martial art. It's not like a combat sport. That's more historical fencing,
Hmm.
but like a serious discipline thing. It's more about self improvement than being the opponent. But although the critics say it's like a recreation of like what sword fighting was in 1700s in France,
That's cool.
which is kind of accurate. So I did classical fencing, and I also had a really short period where I tried Budo Taijutsu, which sometimes get called ninjutsu because it is in fact the current martial art that claims to be descended from the ninja of Japan, and that
Okay.
is actually a combat sport. Where so yeah, like the very first block I learned in doing that, it's like they say if you do it correctly, you will break someone's arm.
Which one is
And
it?
the name of the block, I
Yeah,
mean,
was it? It's like an outside block, right? It's not like all these karate blocks. No, what is it?
trying to I'm trying to remember the name they called it, but it was like really not like a block. It was like a stance that just also will put your arm in the blocking position.
Okay.
Um, it's like something no kamae, um, like Ippon no kamae.
Well, what's
Um,
the? How does it break your arm? Is it like
the
does it
block.
attack your elbow? Do you like
So
what is it?
yeah, so it is. Um, So I would classify it as a supported outer block. The way it breaks someone's arm is that you are supposed to time it so
Okay.
that your fist collides with a certain spot on their elbow.
Okay.
And yes, I did not never break someone's arm, but it did hurt when done
in
correctly.
Kyokushin karate, which my older brother practiced, there's a lot of like, because they don't use gloves and they only punch to the body. If you know about Kyokushin,
A little bit.
uh,
I've seen
yeah.
videos.
So there's a lot of like, let me punch the outside elbow on purpose to like kill their arm, make them they can't pick it up, break it, attack, punch the wrist when they're blocking on purpose with your knuckles and stuff like that. So very interesting. Okay, so we only got one question, which upsets me. People ask more questions, but it's from Daniel Victorine Bermont, and they ask this: What do you find useful learning about models of computation versus specific languages?
So so it's a little so there's a little interesting question. So I can say what I'm guessing he means. So first,
Okay,
let's hit it literally. So so a model computation to me means um, basically like a very abstract primitive computer. So perhaps you've heard of the Turing machine. The Turing machine is like basically a little hand that slides up and down an infinite piece of tape and writes different symbols. And it's known that things like sounds it's very simple but sounds like very primitive, but it can do the same thing a computer can. Another kind of model computation is a post system, which is you just have a string of letters and then you have certain rules which you change one string of letters to a different string of letters. It doesn't
hmm
sound much like a computer at all, but it can do computation. And so those things are called models of computation. And I mean, they're mostly not useful. They're just like theoretical constructs used for proving things. But I'll answer in a second what I think he's asking about.
okay,
Specific languages. So, and I mentioned I've worked in 30 or 40 of them. Um, just like, so my PhD is in programming languages. But if you ask a programming languages researcher what's your favorite programming language, it's a lot like asking a mechanical engineer what's your favorite car. It's like I like study gears and that's like study gears and fuel injection systems and like not
I see, I
Honda
see,
versus
I see.
Ford.
Okay,
That's, so um so yeah so what I'm guessing he actually wants to know about is like these specific concepts behind programming languages, which are indeed what PL people study, and so it's like it's like you think I got 30 or 40 languages by reading a book in each of them? It's like, no, there's like relatively a handful more basic things. And then it's like learning a new language is more like learning a new board game than learning a new human language.
do you think that this is similar to how like linguistics professors learn languages, where they don't necessarily learn the language itself, but they learn like the fundamental rules of how like people think in languages, or how languages operate, or in syntax rules, or whatever it is?
It probably has some commonalities. Like I've never met him, but I once read an article about people who know the most languages, and one of them was an MIT linguistics professor who allegedly can just like listen to people talking in a language for a few minutes, and then he's able to converse in it.
That's
And
insane.
I don't know how he did that, but yeah,
Well, there might be some intuitions, because we are humans, we are language
like
processing beings. So
say, and I'll say like I do know a few people who in this PhD program. In fact, one of my teammates on the gymnastics team, who still trains with us, is finished her PhD and is now a Harvard linguistics professor. But and like she'll talk a lot about how she thinks like different forms evolved in different languages and language families and doing field work, but that's don't think she has a magical ability to pick up a ton of languages.
I see. Do you think you have a magical ability to pick up a bunch of different specific programming languages, or is it
I mean, I
something?
think I have that ability, but it's not magical because I think um, I think most I don't like it's I think most programmers past a certain point of seniority, even without all the study I've done, acquire similar
Acquire a bunch of
abilities.
them, it just becomes easy. Okay, I hear that. Well, we are unfortunately at the end of our time with you. What do you what are, oh You wanted to talk about psychology as well. Do you want to talk about that? You said you wanted to bring something up about it,
All
or
right, so I'll just say one of the first things we teach in our course is about complexity, and um, and so I give people like two pieces, like kind of piece of code, ask to simplify it, and usually people can suggest like, well, here's the way it's simpler. And then I ask them why it's simpler, and it's like, well, if you do it this way, you like reorder these things, you have to keep less in your head. They're like, well, great. So now to argue about why things simpler, you need to argue about psychology. But I kind of give an escape hatch to that, which is that actually, like, you know, I am a believer that humans are mechanistic computing devices. It's doesn't make us not special. It just means that we're not magical. We're part of the universe built of atoms.
I agree.
And there's and programming languages, they are formal determinist. As messy as they can be and implement them, they still can be expressed as formal determinist concepts. And there's only so many ways you can reason about them. Like, they follow rules. You have certain things you can do to make inferences or statements about them. There's only so many of them. There's like a very short list. And so what this means is that if you look at how a computer system would reason about a program, or or someone doing a pen and paper proof could reason in a program, the things that you're doing in your head, it can't be that different. So if we can look at what would make one of these former proof systems require more knowledge or state to deal with some code, that actually tells us that the human would also need to be keeping more in their head as well. And that gives us a way to talk about the complexity of code while avoiding this pure psychology aspect of what you need to keep in your head. It's like, it's not what you need to keep in your head. It's like, this is just part of the state of what's true at a certain point that must be tracked in order to say this other thing you want to be true later.
Okay. Elaborate a little bit. I think I missed you there.
So all right, so going back to physical analogy I used earlier about like repairing an airplane.
Okay.
So you can imagine something that says, all right, say you want to replace 3 different parts of the airplane. I can't go into detail because I know nothing about airplane maintenance.
Neither do I, so it's perfect.
Replace 3 different pieces of the airplane. So it's a bit of a straw man, but say your instructions could say, take out these tools or take this part out, replace it, put them away, put your tools away, then repeat the next one. Or it could say, take out all these tools, then take out all these tools, then take out all these tools, then take this thing out, then take this thing out, then this thing out, then blah, blah, put it back together. And so you could say, well, the second version of the instructions sounds more complicated because that's because you need to keep track of more parts.
Okay.
You're like, well, you're just talking about psychology, or like you're just talking about how you're like messy in the workshop and you not a good organizer. You can talk about it that way, or you can say, well, like, no, it's like you're taking this thing out in step 1 and you still need it to put it in step 30, so it needs to be somewhere lying around the 29 steps in between.
It needs to be accessible. You have to be able to retrieve it, whether it be memory, whatever it might be. Okay.
And so there's the same phenomenon that happens when you reorder code, in that the stuff just needs to be lying around somewhere for some in between steps. And so you can, instead of talking about, you need to keep it in your head and have to appeal to psychology, you can just objectively say, like, no, it must be remembered and tracked. In the same way that one version of airplane instructions requires you to have the tools and the parts lying around somewhere for 30 different steps.
I mean, but I would say that is psychology, right? It's about sometimes we know we don't have the necessary mental RAM. I mean, so you put it in front of you, you keep it on the board in front of you. So you don't really have to remember it; it's just in sight.
Sure, you definitely get psychological justification as well, but I don't know. That's But if you're uncomfortable with trying to make very bold deterministic claims about how brains work, which I am somewhat, but you are comfortable about talking about how computers and math and formal systems work, It lets
Yeah,
you
but I
replace.
mean, I would say brain works like a system, right? It has inputs, it has outputs.
Yeah,
Um,
but I am able to make much clearer predictions about many systems that aren't brains.
yeah, I mean, brains are complicated and very
Yeah.
much don't know. They're very associative as well, which is a problem. Well, we are unfortunately at the end of our time. I mean, I love to have you on, but where can people meet you? What do you want people to find about
Yeah.
you?
So
Um,
yeah, and so on. So so I think the stuff I said was interesting, and you're a software engineer. I definitely encourage you to check out our offerings at Mirrodin.com, Mirdin.com, where I mean, I just think we mentioned are just kind of scratching the surface, but like, when I say we turn engineers superstars, I really mean it. Yeah, I sometimes have trouble believing our testimonials at times. So my blog is pathsensitive.com. It's all one word, path, P-A-T-H, sensitive. Okay, I won't spell it out. It's pathsensitive.com. Um, and you can click on the top where it says archive, and it will show you a nice list of my blog posts categorized. So there's a good section on software engineering philosophy. So Dan earlier mentioned the one about how an ancient philosophy problem explains dependence, which is actually about a paper that I wrote. It's about causality. That's a And finally, of course, my website is jameskoppel.com or jimmykoppel.com. Either will work. You can see my academic research there.
well, I would say you should definitely go and follow his blog. Those really interesting readings, um, and also your Twitter is great, by the way. I found it
Thank you.
fascinating. Well, James, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you. And
Had a good time.
we should definitely do it again, but maybe with someone a little bit more expertise, means you guys can get to the real nitty gritty, not surface level stuff. There's someone I definitely want you to talk with. I'll have Felicia message you and stuff. Maybe that'd be a really good
Awesome.
conversation.
That'd be a lot of fun.
Okay, thank you so much. I really
All
appreciate
right.
you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye bye. Ah, I love that guy. That was absolutely. I really do from that conversation. It takes me back a lot to like linguistics and how the way in which we model our world with our language really matters. Um, and I like what I mean. There's a quote that he said earlier on. What was it? Um, what was it? Something about when you design a program, the assumption should be that it should be changed. Something along those lines. And I found that to be true with a lot of times when I talk philosophy or even politics with people. It's these linguistic assumptions that we make about things that we have to be able to be creative and be able to actually change them to deal with whatever problems we're facing. One of my first videos was about paradigm shifts. And I think that's a part of that. It's semantics and linguistics. Being able to do that and change that around is very important. I think I have a new follower between segments. That's really interesting. My friend Raj is telling me about this, but Raj, you can come in for sure because we're about to talk with you. Raj, for those who don't know, is my college roommate. He's one of my favorite people and one of my bestest friends of all time. And a lot of people always ask me, Dandan, where do you get your political ideas from? Um, you know, the three-edged sword. I see. P.S. Evening. Good evening. What is your main topics for tonight? Well, three-edged sword. You just heard one of those topics. I spoke with Jimmy Koppel, and I'm very ignorant about programming. So I thought, hey, I'm going to talk to this guy who knows so much about it. And maybe, there's people who are more noobs at programming who need this type of like surface level conversation with someone who can, speak more about it on its fundamental issues. My second topic is going to be with the person I'm introducing right now. We're going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about candidates. We're going to talk about the current election coming from. And this is why I'm introducing Raj, who should come into the chat. I sent him the link. Let's see when he comes in. But a lot of people always ask me, "Oh, Dandan, where do you get your political ideas from? Who is it? Like, how do you know where to find important stuff? How do you know when to find unimportant things?" And my circle of close friends are all political science people. And Raj is one of them. and he is an amazing human being. And we talk about, not being in echo chambers. And luckily, my closest friends around me are people who, they're people who keep me in check, who make sure that, I'm not completely full of shit. So before Raj comes on, you might want to tilt your camera down a tiny bit. But perfect. There we go. Well, let's bring Raj in and we can start talking about the current election. Hello, Raj. What's up, my bro? How are you doing?
Hey, hey, how's it going, man?
Fantastic.
Great to be here. This is cool.
This is cool, isn't it?
This is really cool.
It's like a little like
Um,
studio.
yeah, but yeah, Dandan and hi everybody on the
Rumble
watching
slash YouTubes.
on in the watching the Pangburn Universe in its in action, watching a canon event, as we say.
Hmm.
No, yeah, glad to be here. I mean,
Okay, so
and you and I,
yeah, go
you and
ahead.
I have been on a you and I have been in here through college, like you said. I think I think it's safe to say we've been each other's own check, so to speak. Kind of keeping each other out of our comfort zone politically because we came from two very different backgrounds,
We
right?
did. We did. We very much
We
did.
did. We
We
did.
did.
I
And we
mean, I
really
can
and we met around Trump's election. We were a year or so before Trump entered the
we
White
met
House, right?
Yeah, we met around 2015 at the
Hmm.
start, like which is when election season was just about going on, right?
Yes, yes,
And
we did.
then 2016 election, the 2016 general election happened. We watched it happen in the dorms live.
We did. That was crazy.
Um,
That was crazy. That's back when everything was about liberal tears and blue haired feminists and
right,
yeah,
right,
yeah,
right. That was the wake of the Obama era of
yeah.
of um of our country here.
And you know what's
I
funny? Mitch McConnell was melting then, and he's still melting today. It's been a really long process
Mitch
of melt.
McConnell has been melting since I've been watching politics and since I've seen him on the TV. He's just always been melting to me. I've always known him
Yeah.
as that man. I think Ted Cruz also a little bit. His nose kind of looks like it's just like everything's building up, about to start to drip off from the nose. I feel
Is that
like
just what happens when you steep yourself in like the corruption of the of like politics
probably. I would say so. I would say so. Those are two of the most corrupt dudes in the
in the
game in this
business?
country, in the business.
Hmm.
Yeah, but this election is actually it's actually probably the best time to do any sort of election coverage whatsoever. It's probably the best time to start because this is August 1st. The first debate, the Republican debate, I believe is the 23rd of August.
Hmm.
We've started that month. Iowa's they've already been in Iowa, getting like campaigning down there ahead of the caucus, the Republican candidates, and so I don't think the country really knows them yet. I don't think we really know them yet too much. I think we talked about doing this, about having one of our usual political chats just on
Us on
stream,
air, exactly.
just on air. Yeah, we kind of we mentioned kind of going a little bit into some of the candidates together and exploring some of them a little bit more. I think it's a little bit more beneficial to cover the Republicans right now
I
because
mean,
I
yeah, the
mean,
Democrats have who? They have obviously Biden, and then there is Kennedy Jr., who's just
don't worry about it. There is no one else.
a
It's Joe
waste of
Biden.
space. And then there's Marianne Williamson, but she's also just not. It's just
Marianne Williamson is polling, I believe, even less right now. You
been
know,
RFK, right?
than RFK. I think the last poll actually had him about the same as DeSantis is right now. I think DeSantis is about
Really?
16, 17, 18. I think
Yeah,
on Real
that's
Clear
really
Politics,
flopping. That's really flopping. DeSantis
DeSantis,
is really flopping.
the Ron DeSantis. Oh my God, we just should just go in on Ron DeSantis. I think Ron DeSantis should
Well,
be the first guy we
let's
just
start
we
with
just
Ron
start
DeSantis.
with.
Let's start with Ron
I mean,
DeSantis.
his campaign, right, starts out with one of his mottos is "Let's make America Florida," right? I mean, That's something they actually talk about. There's also the political ads. Like there's so much just like as you mentioned the word DeSantis, in my head just so many different like things just come up. I mean, the state of Florida right now. He says make America Florida, right? Let's look at the state of Florida right now, right? You know,
Let's look at the state of Florida. Let's do it.
so
Let's look at the state of Florida.
as a result of climate change, of increased hurricanes, you know, of hurricane season getting worse and worse. They've had like I think about 5 insurance companies have at least left Florida on some level. What was it? AAA reduced pulled back from renewing some insurance policies first. Now Farmers is just leaving Florida, and this is becoming a real problem in the state. Centauri, another company.
What are the things leading to that, right? Because we know there was the collapse of the high rise in Miami, right?
Right.
Was that a part of that, or is it more just like
I don't believe that was a part of that. I
No, you
believe
don't
that was a
believe-
part of just incorrect, just poor building management and things of the like. But I don't know. Maybe there was something there. I don't
I have no
recall.
idea. I just remember.
Let's
Let's look it up. Let's look it up live. You can, by the way, I think, can you share your screen? I don't know if you're allowed to or not.
can
Might
I?
be- I think you might.
Oh, there is
be
a
able-
share screen button.
Yeah, you can share your screen.
So I actually have some links here
Oh,
already.
excellent. Pull them up so we can watch.
So I
them.
should just share my screen then, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So
100%.
let's see. Here's 5 insurers that are leaving Florida. There's one.
Good. Let's add it to the scene.
Okay, so how do I?
No, I'll get it. I'll get it in. Boom! It's in. It's live.
It's
happening.
live.
Yeah.
5 insurers that are already leaving. That are leaving Florida or already have.
Okay.
So this
So
is
AAA
refer. AAA. No, AAA is not leaving, but AAA announced that it's not going to renew some auto and home insurance policies. Statement. Unfortunately, Florida's insurance market has become challenging in recent years. Last year's catastrophic hurricane season contributed to an unprecedented rise in reinsurance rates, making it more costly for insurance companies to operate. Farmers insurance. This business decision was necessary to effectively manage risk exposure.
Well, why is there such an increase in risk? Like, is this due to DeSantis's policies? Is it because of the lack?
It's not necessary. Look, it's due to climate change.
Okay,
It's
obviously,
due
yeah,
to
climate change.
Climate change making hurricanes worse, right? DeSantis, I'm not the most well versed on his environmental policies, but just from a general perspective, right? A general perspective on the Republican Party, on Republican candidates, right wing candidates on the whole, even now with the conservative era, with the MAGA era, where there's a big difference between MAGA conservatives and the old guard of the Mitt Romneys
Yes.
and what you will. There
Liz
is still
Cheney's
the
and all
common,
those.
there
those
is
sites.
still the common thread, right, on climate change.
A hoax
where
by
there-
the Chinese, right?
Where if it's not denying it outright and saying it's a hoax by the Chinese, it's saying, oh well, it's saying along the lines of like, well, we're not, it's climate, there's no evidence that it's man-made, right? That's another argument that's thrown out.
It's a dismissal. It's like a dismissal of climate change.
It's a complete dismissal of climate change at the end of the day, no matter what excuse they're throwing out. And so that's generally looked on negatively for Republicans. That's going to be looked on negatively for Ron DeSantis, and it's going to be likened to him just by nature of being a Republican and being on that side.
I see. So it's this. So for the audience watching, I think what we're getting at is that the denial of the government, at least the Floridian government, understanding the externalities of climate change and trying to deal with that is actually is pulling back the competitiveness of these insurance companies in Florida, because it's not even worth them for investing in that area. Um, I
Absolutely.
know I know that, especially I think Florida had water temperature at 91 degrees for like a week straight at some point, right?
The reading 101 degrees Fahrenheit, according to the New York Times,
Wow.
in the ocean off Florida. Triple digits, man. Triple
So
digits.
for those who don't know,
Hot, incredibly hot temperatures. And I lived in Florida, you know. I lived in
mhm,
Florida since 2008 until until 2 years ago, maybe.
yeah,
A year or two ago.
mhm.
And you know, the temperatures are hot so many times. The winters were like 60 degrees, you know.
I mean, it
The
is Florida, but I think the point is, and a lot of people don't know this, is that when the water gets hotter and retains that heat, when we hit the winter, that heat comes up as hurricanes. Right, that's how usually the hurricanes. It's a buildup of energy within the Atlantic, if I'm not wrong. I think so, at least.
right. Um at the end of the day, that's one thing that's one factor. Then we also have, oh, I've completely forgot, the NAACP, and I'm gonna share this statement from the NAACP with you. This was from May May 20th, May 20th this year.
Okay,
Um, I sent it to you again on the.
would you send it to me? Oh, you sent it to me on Twitter, right? Or
No, I didn't
X?
send
It's
it to you.
called now. X.
I
What
didn't
a
send it to you
what a
on
failure, by the
X.
way. I still think it's funny that on X you literally um, go to tweet on X, and it's called Twitter.com. Very bizarre vola. I don't know why Elon Musk didn't just fix it up from the beginning and just make it possible, right? Okay, you have the
All right.
NCAAP open. Okay, let me share that.
So, a statement from the NAACP, May 20th, 2023. A formal travel advisory to the state of Florida in direct response to Ron DeSantis' aggressive attempts to erase Black history and to restrict diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in Florida schools. The travel notice states Florida is openly hostile towards African Americans, people of color, and LGBTQ plus individuals. Before traveling to Florida, please understand that the state of Florida devalues and marginalizes the contributions of and the challenges faced by African Americans and other communities of color. I mean, we don't really do we need to say much more about that. That's a
I
massive.
mean, we are streaming on Rumble. I think we might have to say a little bit more than that. No,
We are streaming on Rumble,
we
aren't
are
we?
streaming on Rumble.
Hello,
Uh,
Rumble.
I
Oh
think
yeah,
I think that if people think, oh, this is just hyper partisan Democrat establishment like
right.
issues, we have to.
What I meant to say is we don't need to read much more
No, no, we don't need to read. We
of
don't
the
need to read.
statement, right?
So
Yes, but we
these are
obviously
the
need to
things
talk
that you
about it
think are
more. But
plaguing DeSantis at the rest of the country, because most
this is
Republicans aren't MAGA Republicans, right? Or are they?
regardless of whether or not they're MAGA Republicans, you're not getting the NAACP making press statements specifically naming you within the first two sentences, naming you and naming you responsible, and the reason for them warning people that Florida is openly hostile to people of color and LGBTQ plus individuals. You know, this is, you don't get statements like that, for example, and that's just another example. That's just one example, but this is a part, regardless of, and let's get away from the partisanship kind of belief and just talk about the election for a second, right?
Okay.
Right. This is this is part of DeSantis's strategy, right? When DeSantis locked up the state of Florida, it was considered a huge win for Ron DeSantis, right? It's a huge win for the Republican Party. Massive win for the Republican Party. Put DeSantis on the map, and people started likening him, right, to the next Trump, to Donald Trump. They called him Donald Trump without the baggage, right? He soared in the polls. He was
And that's when he
very
locked it up during COVID.
when he locked it up during COVID, he won the election again, the governor election again, running against what was it, Charlie Crist. Oh my God, Charlie Crist. Don't even get me started with Charlie
Well,
Crist. Charlie
he's not
Crist has
running.
been-
He's not running for office. We can ignore Charlie Crist's existence.
That's what we say until Charlie Crist runs for office again.
Okay.
This is what happens with Charlie Crist. He just shows up, ruins everything. But in any case, but yeah, what were we saying? That was a digression.
DeSantis locked up. It's Trump without the baggage.
He was by far the favorite, number 2 to Trump, and was seen as the biggest threat to Trump. And Trump obviously went on the offensive at DeSantis after that. But before we even get to talking about Donald Trump, DeSantis has since then, since he has launched his campaign, actually, since he has just crashed and burned. He is now like, I don't know, polls have him like 35, 36 points behind Trump in some major polls. You know, it's between 20 to 30 on average, I guess. According to Let's Talk Elections, a YouTube channel I really love.
Okay.
And and it's really it's just been a collapse on every level. What was the article that I read that came, the leak from
about him
DeSantis
torturing people at like Guantanamo Bay? Is that the leak or no?
Oh, no, not even that. That's just talking about his character. And let's be clear. The American people did not read that article, the articles that talk about all of that stuff about Ron DeSantis. They didn't read the article about Ron DeSantis's time as a teacher where he taught like more pro-South,
lost cause-ish type of argument.
Lost cause-ish sort of teaching. So they don't understand, like, this is the kind of person Ron DeSantis is. And they don't understand yet that Ron DeSantis had started his campaign from a position of running as Trump without the baggage. Beyond what they heard on CNN, which, to be honest, the majority of people don't watch CNN. So
majority of people watch Fox News. Oh.
There you go. So, this is a country.
Well, DeSantis' campaign is consistently faltering, and I think that when you look at like the NCAA letter, insurance companies leaving Florida, his battle with Disney, for example, is another one of these things that's making him unpopular. People like Disney. This is just a fact.
Absolutely, but that's obviously another major thing of the DeSantis campaign. He has gone maybe even to the right of Donald Trump from a political standpoint, in the way that he has just sweepingly issued the conservative agenda in his state, and winning his state. It was very ruthless, got a lot of people on the left to look over. Then they had what was it? Any case, I lost my train of thought. I apologize, but in any case, the case in point being, DeSantis running on the right of Trump has not seemed to do him any favors. Right now, he's polling. I just pulled up a thing on Real Clear Politics. Shows the election poll averages, puts DeSantis as 18.1% behind Trump's 53.9% in the national GOP primary.
That's insane.
Right?
That's insane. That's way different than it was 3 months ago, 4 months ago.
That's not what it was. That's not what it was when he won the elections. When he won the re-election for governor. When he started being talked about on a national level as a potential successor to Donald Trump. And probably the best strategy would have been to not run at all this year, and to run after this year and let Trump have his second chance. You know, I
think it's a conflict between Trump and DeSantis that has made it worse for him?
Absolutely, because I mean, the majority of who is Ron DeSantis reaching out to? Who are the voters he's reaching out to? He's not reaching out to the middle. He's absolutely not reaching out to the middle. He's not reaching out to the left. God knows that he's not going to do that. He's running in a Republican.
Well, is he not reaching out to the MAGites? Is he not reaching out to those that Donald
That's Trump exactly who he's reaching out to. Who else is there?
I mean, there's I mean, you're not going to win a primary by appealing to the centrist Republicans. You're going to have to do it,
Right.
or the
But
libertarian
who's your opponent?
Trump.
MAGA in chief. The original, the one and the only. So people are coming up and looking at those two options, those two main options in Trump and DeSantis, and first of all they're saying, "Okay, I know what Donald Trump has to offer. Show me what you have to offer." And Ron DeSantis has his record, right? But Ron DeSantis doesn't have Trump's charisma. Ron DeSantis doesn't have Trump's energy. He doesn't have Trump's way with words. The MAGA crowd, from what we can see, they like Trump a lot. To the point where they like Trump a lot. That's the easiest way to say it. I mean, Trump is their guy. And Trump was their guy before. DeSantis, it was the whole package with Trump, right? It was the energy of Donald Trump. It was the charisma. It was the vibes. The MAGA party. Okay, I'm skirting around it. I'm just gonna say it. The MAGA party within the Republican Party is a vibes, energy based party. In
Okay.
many respects, not necessarily like there are things like yes, there are conspiracy theories. There are and this is all supported by all of the Trump clones in this election on the Republican primary because there are a few. Ron DeSantis is just the top of the Trump clones. Vivek Ramaswamy is another Trump clone. Um, this is this is this is just one of a phenomenon of people trying to emulate Donald Trump in the hopes that Trump was not going to run to begin with, and two, Trump was not going to be able to run, or he was going to drop out of the race,
or if he gets charged criminally.
Exactly. Which we have the third charge today, which
we'll talk about that after,
which is another thing.
So
that's more to talk about.
So let's just go through DeSantis real quick. So DeSantis, the issues with DeSantis, why he's dropping in the polls, is he doesn't have much to offer. Florida's record is looking more and more abysmal, right? If instead of
Florida's record in terms of wins for DeSantis is large, but the outcomes of those wins have yet to bear fruit at the very least, right?
Okay.
That's the very least we could say that. And we've heard reports from journalists, from pieces on MSNBC, sometimes on CNN, sometimes. So I know a lot of people will discredit them. But they have said that they've spoken to people in DeSantis's camp, or not DeSantis's camp, within the state party, where they said, quote, "That total fascist control he had on the state party is starting to show cracks, with open whispers and signs of defiance coming as a result of the ultra weakness from DeSantis's candidacy." And
he's unable to pull. He's unable to pull it forward.
Yeah, we look at the people that have endorsed presidents from the Republican from the state of Florida, the major people. How many have endorsed? Can we look up how many have endorsed
let's look it up.
DeSantis and how many have endorsed Donald Trump?
Yeah.
I'm fairly certain where it's going to tell a story
that they're mostly endorsing Trump.
Yes, correct.
Okay. So it's almost like a race. So Trump knows that he's at the top of the hierarchy here, which is why he's not entertaining to go and, participate in the upcoming debate. There's no need for him.
And I think the tweet that I sent you actually earlier this morning, if you wanted to,
let me pull it up.
Maybe if you wanted to bring that up, or not tweet. I'm sorry, not tweet. Truth post, right? Because it's a picture. I sent you a tweet with a picture of Donald Trump's post on Truth Central, right?
God. Stop me.
Which one? And this was what Donald Trump had to say.
Oh yeah. So he wrote this. Let them debate, so I can see who I might consider for vice president. Is what he specifically wrote.
That's kind of a crushing statement right there, right?
It is.
And it's true. Donald Trump is leading. I think when you look at the major polls,
Hmm.
Donald Trump is leading in every state in the major polls. I'm not exaggerating. Literally every state in the polls, with the exception of maybe one or two maximum.
Okay.
You know, and granted, the polls have not been right all the time, but I
I mean,
think
were the polls wrong in 2016? Because Hillary did win the majority.
Hillary did win the majority, but frankly, any poll trying to predict the popular vote is kind of pointless because this election isn't won on a popular vote.
It's not.
When I mean, it's not pointless. Let's be clear, it's not pointless. It's predicting what the population of the country. I'm
Bless you.
sorry, I just sneezed on air. But the population of the country would be. It's important to see where the population goes, and to predict that is very interesting and very cool to see. But it's not predicting who's going to win each state, right? The state is not won on popular vote. The presidential election is not won on popular vote. It's won on getting to 270, getting to 270 elect 270 delegates.
Okay.
But yeah,
So other than everyone knows Ron DeSantis, I'm aware of who Ron DeSantis is. Most people are aware of who Ron DeSantis, and he's just getting crushed by Trump, basically. What about
people are starting to know Ron DeSantis, right? People are only now starting to know Ron DeSantis. People will start to. The majority of Americans, let's be honest, have not been paying attention to the race right now. The
No.
majority of Americans will start to pay attention to the race probably once the primaries, or no, probably once the debates start at the very least. And that's why we're having this discussion now, because the first debate starts on the 23rd, right?
And we're really like, both of us. I mean, me a lot more than you, because you're much more involved in this thing. I just find things on YouTube and read news articles, but you're much more tapped into this than me. You've been around this your whole life. We learn about the candidates now, so when we get to this to the debate stage, we can see, are they lying? Are they changing their positions? Because I found a lot, when we first started dorming together. I mean, you told me something like, pay attention to how candidates during the primaries will believe set A of beliefs. And then once they pass the primary, their beliefs start changing, or what they talk about begins to change to appeal more to the general population.
Yeah, and the easiest way to indicate that, right, is the move from the primaries to the general election, right? Because you're not appealing to the Republican Party only anymore, right? You're appealing to the Democrats, the Independents, and the Republicans, right? So at that point, you're trying to appease America. You're trying to say, okay, let me tell the country now who I am. Now I've told the party who I really am, and that's no longer true, right? Because we have TV, we have access into the conventions, we can see the elections happen, we get the results, we see the speeches, we see everything. We have the internet, everybody has a camera now. It's that's no longer the case, right? But
I think we just AD'd this conversation somewhere, and we gotta bring.
Right, I'm doing both. I'm thinking of both things right now.
So what were we looking up? What were you looking up? What are you thinking about right now?
I'm looking up the people who have endorsed DeSantis from Trump in Florida.
Okay.
But if you think we've spent too much time talking on Ron DeSantis, we can move on.
I mean, I can sit on here and stream for you for the next 3 hours and just talk about this topic. You and I can.
Well,
talk
I don't have that kind of time.
I know. But let's go ahead and I think move. Let's talk about Vivek Ramaswamy. I know nothing about Vivek. The only thing I know about Vivek is in the Pangburn library, someone posted Vivek Ramaswamy, and I haven't read anything about it.
So I am actually, Vivek Ramaswamy is close to my heart, because Vivek Ramaswamy is Indian, and all these Indian candidates that pop up, I want them to do well, but I know they're not. And
do you even want Vivek Ramaswamy to do well? Like, What are some?
I wanted him to do well within the Republican primary, right?
Okay,
I wanted him to finish like top 3, maybe 4. That would be cool. I think, you know, I don't. But let's be honest. He doesn't really bring too much to the table. He's a Trump clone. I said that before. But if you want to really understand him,
I did see that he wants to ban the Department of Education.
Yeah, he's one of those, right?
Oh, that's insane.
He's one of these people. Have you like David Pakman? I know you like David Pakman.
I do like David Pakman.
He just put up a 30-minute interview with Vivek Ramaswamy.
Did he actually? Do you want to?
Yes,
do you want to watch it together?
I mean, we could watch a little bit of it.
Yeah. Do you have any specific moments that you watch the interview?
So, I think the funniest thing for me is how he ended it, right? And then thinking at how he spoke about the first question. So
okay. We'll do that.
Let's watch the last statement that he makes.
Scott says he just watched it. Oh, okay.
Scott just watched it.
Yeah.
So there we go. Scott, you are going to hear us live talk about this thing you just watched. There you go.
How amazing! You don't get amazing. It doesn't get any better than that. Just talk about the same shit over and over again ad nauseum.
Content for your content.
Easy. Okay. I just I have it ready. Let's go ahead and watch this guy talk. There we go.
By the way, before
yes,
David Pakman. I almost said David Pangburn. David Pakman. David Pakman has been featured on one or two of DeSantis's online ads, right, from his war room.
Yeah, I did see some of that.
Yeah,
I mean,
they did feature him talking about how he's how DeSantis is Trump but smarter, and they took that quote, I think, and then they just used that a million times.
Of course, I believe that David Pakman lacks one thing, and that's careful speech. Like that time when he spoke about the shooters in Nashville or where it was, maybe if they prayed harder, and now he says,
that was a mistake.
That was a big mistake. That was a really big mistake. I understood what he meant to say, but I also read what he did literally say. And those two things are problematic within themselves. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this Vivek Ramaswamy shit.
Yes.
Ramaswamy, who's an entrepreneur, candidate in the 2024 Republican primary, also author of the book Woke Inc., Inside Corporate America's Social Justice Scam, which maybe we will have the opportunity to get to. I really appreciate your time today. I know you're super busy. I'm going to get right into what, fortunately or unfortunately, is often my first question when we speak to candidates right now. It's just sort of like a sanity check, which I think you will pass, honestly.
Let's hope.
Is there any way to interpret that Donald Trump actually won the 2020 election? Or,
by the way, for anyone watching, the answer to that question is no, Donald Trump did not win the 2020 election. That's the sanity check we're talking about. If you are finding yourself in the position right now where you're thinking, did Donald Trump win the election? And you go, yes, it was stolen. Take a step back, realize you're in a cult, take a deep breath, and move away. That's the first thing you have to do. If you think that Trump won and it was stolen, you got to realize you're wearing horse blinders and people are waving pictures in front of your face.
Just look at the court cases and look at the results.
Yeah, obviously.
Or did he lose the 2020 election?
The way you're framing the question, you're asking me a very specific question. Is there any way? Here's one important unexplored strand.
Okay.
The Hunter Biden laptop story and its systematic suppression. I'm a data-driven guy.
Really?
I'm a data-driven guy, and I think you probably are too, based on
absolutely
what little I.
What a way to not answer the fucking question. What? What a way to not answer the question.
No. So he's gonna explain his point here.
Okay.
But if you want me to tell you what he said, I mean,
No, let's watch it. Let's watch it.
Let's watch what he says. Let me not put words into his mouth.
Okay.
I know. So look at the polling data
Yeah.
on the aftermath and before and after. There are more than enough people, it's not even by a super small margin, that say they would have changed their vote had they been exposed to that information before that election. The fact is that was systematically suppressed in what was probably the single greatest form of election interference in American history.
And
there was
in
a lot
other
of discussion.
words,
If I may just finish, just to
Sorry.
so you get the full freight of my view here.
yeah,
There was a lot of discussion about the legitimacy of the 2016 election on the back of Russian election interference that actually, it turns out, was actually much smaller scale than surmised. But on the day of Trump's inauguration, there was a lot of discussion. Hillary Clinton called the election result illegitimate and said that it was partly the product of Russian election interference. Whatever that was, that pales in comparison,
really,
to the effect of the systematic suppression on domestic soil of a story that 2 years later, every news outlet in this country has absolutely admitted was indeed true when it was systematically suppressed at the time. So you asked the question, is there any basis? There's your basis.
And it is, do you have an opinion as to, is it the explicit pictures of Hunter that would have in some way changed people's minds, or the as of yet unproven claims that Joe Biden is involved in some kind of bribery fraud scheme, or like what about it?
So I'm not speaking for the survey respondents, but I can tell you what speaks to me.
Yeah,
actually, because I wouldn't have changed my vote. I voted for Trump, right? So
I just want to say, I know that I was going to talk about this tonight. There is a new information regarding the Hunter Biden laptop / Biden's involvement in his business proceedings.
Stop.
What?
Stop. The indictment came out today.
The development
and
is
you're
this.
going to talk about Hunter Biden's laptop?
The development is this. It's even more bullshit than we thought to begin with. Because, okay, I have to pull this up.
Oh my God.
Okay, I have to pull this up. Okay, 1 second.
Fine.
Here. We have to interject with this because Vivek Ramaswamy, you know something? For all the nonsense he just said in the last 2 minutes, he's a politician. He knows how to do politician.
No. This is from a political standpoint. This is something you can absolutely say. This is something you can absolutely say if you're trying to win over the MAGA crowd. If you're trying to make a push to either become a person on Trump's cabinet, if you're trying to become someone who could inherit the throne to Donald Trump after the fact. Remember, Vivek Ramaswamy is running as a 37-year-old,
true,
youngest in the field, right? And I just hit my knee on the desk. But I mean, at the end of the day, he has time. He doesn't need to win this election. Like Donald Trump is really, really old. I don't even know how old he is. He's
Biden old. We can just call it Biden old.
He's Biden age. Biden age. This is Trump needs to win this election, and if not this election, then he maybe has the chance for like maybe one more left. I have no idea. But Vivek can go from this. He can move this into to start a political career for him. He started as a businessman.
So this might not even be a run for actually winning, but it's a run for exposure, to get on the scene, to get recognized.
This very well could be that. My belief is that that's what that is. He's been a businessman his whole life. One thing he mentions in this in this interview that we don't necessarily need to play because it's just somewhere in the middle, was something along the lines of I'm ADDing out. What did I just say?
One of the things that he said in the middle of the debate, not necessarily about being president, but exposure for the campaign,
was I did not register what you just said at all.
We were just talking about how Vivek Ramaswamy is not necessarily going to win this campaign. It's not for becoming president, but it's about
right, for his career.
And what did he
right?
say in the middle of the Pac-Man show that was related to that?
In the middle of the Pac-Man show that was related to that. So he said at the end of the day that his that he started out or right. I remember where we are now. Sorry about that, folks. But he went into boardrooms. He said, quote, I think it was something like boardrooms across the country or something. Boardrooms across the country, something grand like that he said about bringing in his woke agenda, about bringing his anti-woke agenda and getting rid of the forced diversity quotas in boardrooms and things of the like with that, so that kind of shows you a beginnings of interest in getting into politics, right? From the business side, he's in the business world and he's starting to do something that is on the line with right-wing politics, right?
Okay, I see.
So that's indicating a desire that he wants to do this. And now he's coming into the election. This is his first time running in an election, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure that is. And he's going into it. He will say to win it. I mean, obviously he wants to win it. He wants to be president. But he can do exactly what Buttigieg did. He could maybe not win the election, maybe drop out and endorse Donald Trump.
Hoping that Trump wins and then he gets put in the cabinet or whatever it might be.
Exactly. Hoping that Trump wins, getting into a cabinet position, and then maybe foraying that into the Senate.
Yeah.
Or a governorship. Or another presidential run. You don't know what's going to happen for him.
True. He's young. He's 37.
Yeah, he's young. He's 37. Donald Trump likes to fire people fire people like crazy in his cabinet. But what he appreciates is loyalty. Vivek Ramaswamy has come across as maybe the most loyal candidate in the field. What was it he put out? I believe it was not a petition of some kind, but a paper that he got. He got members of he wanted members of the Republican field to sign, basically saying maybe something along the lines of not agreeing with the with the indictments of being against this against the sort of attacks on Trump from the legal system and from Joe Biden.
So I see he's playing that like brown nosing where he's gonna ride Trump's ass, but not too hard where Trump notices him riding his ass.
Trump probably notices him riding his ass.
I mean, I guess so. Trump does like things up his ass. I don't know. We'll have to.
But yeah, he's exactly what I told you he was yesterday. In everything we said, he's
Trump light.
He's Trump light, to put it in PG terms.
It's like when you download like a phone game and there's like the light version and then the paid version. Vivek is the light version without all the bells and whistles attached.
He's a clone.
He's a clone.
He's a Trump clone, potentially trying to foray this into a career. That's how I see it.
So let's talk about this Hunter Biden laptop thing that's related to this Vivek Ramaswamy thing that is related to the Pangburn interview that we were speaking about.
Yes.
Yes.
This is how our conversations go, folks. We diverge.
It's okay. Everyone loves a little bit of ADD.
We enlighten ourselves more because of it, I would think.
I see.
On some topics.
Yeah. Let's just watch this real quick.
Testify before the House Oversight Committee on Capitol Hill. Republicans are now raising questions about whether President Joe Biden's son involved his father, the president, in his business dealings. ABC's Aaron Katersky is in Washington with the details.
Hunter Biden's former business partner testifying the president's son sold the illusion of access to his powerful father. Lawmakers who were in the room telling us Devin Archer said Hunter Biden took calls from his dad in the presence of clients and often put him on speakerphone.
Approximately 20 times over the course of 10-year relationship, Hunter may have put his father on the phone with any number of different people, and they never once spoke about any business dealings. As he described it, it was all casual conversation niceties, the weather.
While Democrats say the closed-door testimony proved nothing, Republicans say it shows President Biden lied when he said he never talked business with his son. Archer's attorney saying in a statement, "We are aware that all sides are claiming victory, but all Devon Archer did was show up and answer the questions." The White House has been asked repeatedly whether the president ever communicated with his son Hunter about his business dealings.
The president was never in business with his son.
As Republicans aim to tie President Biden to his son's legal troubles, they're also now investigating how Hunter Biden was trying to resolve gun and tax charges with federal prosecutors. A deal collapsed last week in court, and Republicans call the arrangement unusual and say it raises serious concerns about preferential treatment by the Biden Justice Department. Hunter Biden thought the plea agreement would end his legal exposure. Federal prosecutors left open the possibility of additional charges.
Yeah, I don't care about this guy, but that's basically it. And the reason why I think it's even more of a nothing burger is because, A, I have a father. You have a father. Could you imagine not talking to your dad about what's going on in your life? Going on in your business dealings? I think that is normal. I would expect that from a dad. But for the person to say we've never actually talked about business, it was more Hunter selling the illusion that Biden was going to be involved in this somehow, but never was, just corroborates the idea of, no, I never I never did business with my son like that. What do you think?
I think this is a load of shit of crap. Oh my god, dude. I think at the end of I just don't have the bandwidth to bother with the Hunter Biden story. I mean,
but this is going to be talked about nonstop.
This is a major talking point from the Republican side, and it's something we might hear about it. No, not might. We will hear about it when we have the Trump Biden rematch that nobody wants in the general election. We will hear Donald Trump mention it time and time again in the debates on Joe Biden, because this is a major thing for the Republican Party. But
I mean, Vivek just brought it up, right? Yeah, at the end of the day, go ahead.
At the end of the day, what does this do for Donald for the country? What does this do for the world? What does this do for your state? What does it do for your city? What does it do for your county? What does it do for anything? Right?
Yeah, correct. It's nothing. It's literally just noise.
Nothing. It's
literally just noise.
The fact of the matter is, Donald Trump is currently in some of the hottest water we've seen in the history of this country's leaders. In the history of this country's leaders. Maybe not the worst. I don't know enough of history to know that. And frankly, there have been some really, really crazy things in the history of this country. For example, post-Civil War, when we had a certain president take over after a certain vice president take over after Abraham Lincoln, and basically just scupper any sort of reconstruction plan that Lincoln and the Republican Party had, because he didn't believe in any of that stuff. He was only there as a unity candidate on the election ballot for the VP.
Yeah. Assassinations have effects, by the way. People think that if you assassinate, just a power vacuum happens. Yeah, power vacuums are detrimental to parties and groups in general. So,
actually, some assassinations in this country have had such an impact in the mood of the country, to the point where, when it affects the mood of the country, that's a huge thing. It's not just, boo-hoo, everybody's sad. It's when everybody's sad, it affects everything, right?
Yeah, I guess so. It changes the landscape, right? One thing can
changes the landscape. It changes the landscape of a country. When Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, and maybe it took a couple times in the U.S., because Abraham Lincoln, when he was assassinated, people were still able to come in and out of the White House, right? That's how James Garfield was assassinated not too long after, when Charles Guiteau kept coming into the White House asking for a job, and then they kept turning him down, and then he ended up coming back and being incredibly angry about that, and thinking that he had something to do with James Garfield's success that Garfield did not want ever. He did not want to be president. Guiteau was insane and went and assassinated Garfield because he thought Garfield was a step in the road for his godly ascension, divine ascension to become whatever, the prophet.
Wow. A lot of narcissism, I guess. Not that far off.
That was Guiteau. That was the Garfield murders, And the Secret Service actually happened. I don't know if it was because of that or if it was not long after that. Actually, I recently read about the Garfield assassination, and that thing was so much happened from that. Actually, it's really, really astonishing. Graham Bell also developed the first iteration of maybe like a prototype of what could be called the X-ray now.
Okay.
For James Garfield, as well as the AC was invented to help keep him cool while he was
dying.
While he was dying, essentially, yeah. But Garfield didn't die because of the bullet. I mean, yes, he died because he was shot. Not died because he was shot. He was shot. But then the doctors afterwards did not believe in in sterilizing anything, and
that's what killed him.
They literally just stuck their fingers inside the wound and poked around inside his body without washing their hands on the dirty train floor. Tons of people watching.
And that's what killed him. And
the doctor that did that took hostage essentially of the entire care of the president, because he saw this as his way back into into stardom, perhaps, within his field. And that put him and he insisted he knew everything about what was going on with Garfield, and he knew best, and everything he thought was wrong. He thought the bullet was
very eerily of everything that's happening in politics. Politicians want to stay in power, and if we understand political action as how do we stay in power, we recognize that what they're telling us it's not about what they're telling us, it's about what are they doing, what policy are they actually pushing forward that should really matter to us. Not the Hunter Biden laptop.
When it comes to, sorry, not to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
Okay, not because the Republican Party, at the very least, is maybe as well for Democrats, is kind of a party that is that you can just kind of hear it over time. You don't need to listen. You don't need to read into their policies and see it over time. Look at Lindsey Graham, for example. Lindsey Graham being the person before Trump won the primary, pretty much almost to the day, perhaps, before Trump won the primary, he was the harbinger. He was saying he was the harbinger of death. He said had the bells. He was ringing it. He said, "Death is upon us. The Republican Party is coming to an end. Donald Trump is winning. This is going to be the end of us." As soon as Donald Trump became the candidate, he fell in line. He was just loyal
like Chris
to
Christie.
a fault. He is still loyal to a fault. He is still loyal to Donald Trump, to the point where he went to a rally in South Carolina this year, sometime a few months ago, I think. And Donald Trump went with him to campaign, and even Donald Trump heard boos when he started to give Lindsey Graham some praise.
Ouch, that must hurt. Imagine being such a simp. God,
he simped the entire way through the MAGA era of this country so far, and has just his respect. The respect he had on whatever side of the aisle you want to consider is down to zero from every side now.
I see. I mean, Chris Christie is trying to fix that faux pas where he literally lost to Trump after being called like a fat whatever it was.
And Chris Christie is the third maybe candidate we should probably talk about, because no one really cares about Mike Pence.
Sure. But yeah, he calls his wife mother. That's all you have to know. But let's go ahead and finish this interview with Vivek Ramaswamy. Let's go ahead and finish this part. So we got here after realizing that Vivek is just talking about Hunter's laptop instead of answering the question. And let's see him try to bring this all back together.
Wasn't one of the survey respondents who said I would have changed my vote because of it.
Good.
So here's what does speak to me, and I think it's relevant. Let's just take this outside the scope of political partisanship. The Burisma payments to Hunter Biden are a deep problem. $5 million paid by a Ukrainian company, privately owned by somebody who at the time was sitting on the National Security Council in Ukraine. Relevant now because it did result in an impeachment of a U.S. president that was Trump, who called for further investigation of that in Ukraine. But that wasn't the only geopolitical consequence of it. I think it has deep-seated implications even now for, say what many people on Russia's side of this say. Well, you have a U.S. president whose son was dealing, when that person was vice president, with actually the Ukrainian government indirectly, accepting what in any other context we would call bribes, so much so that President Obama's staff actually raised this with Biden, only to be shouted down by it. This is a bipartisan concern. That's a real issue. Also, the shell companies created to do business with China and the Chinese government, again, paid millions of dollars. That is relevant information on the eve of a presidential election, when the fourth largest newspaper in circulation, the New York Post, founded by Alexander Hamilton, had its social media accounts locked for publishing a story where you and I would have had our accounts locked for even sending it via direct message or email. So I do think we have to go back and reconcile ourselves with that, have to reckon with that, admit what went wrong if we're actually to move forward in the future.
By the way, this is just brinksmanship, where you make the arguments for a conclusion without saying the conclusion. He's talking about a deep state and he's talking about a conspiracy without actually saying, I'm talking about a deep state, I'm talking about a conspiracy.
Correct.
Yeah.
Sweeping that under the rug and relegating that to be the concern of rubes that live in the middle of the country and are election deniers, I think is the wrong approach for us to heal as a country. I think we have to reckon with the fact that we did that as a nation. The United States of America, we let that happen. Admit that. Now, my view is nations make mistakes. You can move forward if you understand those mistakes.
Trying to say something and he can't say it.
So, not to stay on this, but to summarize, in terms of a factual vote dumps or sandwiches and ballots under the table or vans backing in, Mike Lindell, cyber guys looking for bamboo fibers on the ballots, you're not talking about any of that. You're simply saying, had some people known about the allegations related to Hunter Biden at the time, enough people in some states might have changed their votes such that Trump would have gotten to 270. That's your position.
If that story had not been systematically top-down suppressed,
I gotcha.
I think there's good data to suggest it could have changed the result of the election. That's
okay,
correct.
Good. And the point, again, is not to debate it with you, but to get your position on the record.
It's data-driven, so it's not really
I'm super interested in your campaign.
Okay, does this mean we can move on to the end part, or is there more to
it? Yes. That's it. Honestly, that's it.
Okay, where do I go?
But that's it. Pacman had to actually basically take what he said and make an answer out of it.
Obviously, that's it. There's no. Does he not at the end said repeat it again or something?
No. What he says at the end is he basically goes off and he's just like, if I say anything that's not based in fact, then is blah 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 blah, is something like that. And the beginning, the very first thing we talk about just contradicts it. So I just find it hilarious.
Okay, I see.
Yes.
Well, he seems like a Magite. He seems like obviously he's not. It is intelligent of him to move the conversation from the dumps, Mike Lindell, and instead of talking about the election was stolen as like a whole thing, he's kind of saying, if the people knew about the Hunter Biden laptop, and they would have changed their mind, and it's data driven. Well, you can't know. That's a counterfactual. There's no data. No data can supply you with that information. That if in the past something would be different, therefore this would be the outcome. That's not a data-driven analysis, right?
Do you know what it tells Republicans? You know what Republicans probably think when they hear that?
What?
They probably think, oh, this guy's saying something different. He's saying something fresh. He's saying something new. Ooh, this isn't a MAGA clone. This is MAGA clone prime. This is the guy who is coming out and not giving me the same answer about the 2020 about the 2020 election that I'm hearing constantly from this and that. He's saying, "Oh, the election will be over. The election might have been different had we had this story on Hunter Biden's laptop before the election." You know, that's what the answer David Pakman got out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's first of all, do you think that would sway enough voters? I'm not so sure.
Who would know? Who could know?
Who could know?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, a huge part of the country, right? I mean, we're going to find out now. Right? This is going to be Biden versus Trump 2.0. It looks like, right? So we will see now how that affects the election. Maybe it would have been different back then because it could have been maybe more immediate, more immediately before election day, before November, like sort of like a James Comey kind of thing, and maybe that would have changed people's minds a little bit, like 2016. I'm not so sure because I mean, regardless, I mean, we see nowadays.
I would say the difference is that the Hunter Biden laptop is about Hunter Biden. It's not about Biden himself, right? All of the lawsuits are against Biden as an individual. You have to connect those two. But you could do that with anything, right? You could say that, oh, the suppression of, I don't know, Trump's indictments, whatever, would change the landscape. But I don't. This argument.
If the Trump indictments, in my personal opinion, if we're going to talk about the general scope of the election, I think is really going to do a huge deal of damage to Donald Trump in the general election.
Obviously, it does.
I think it does. It absolutely does, right? And that's why I think a Biden-Trump rematch is going to 100% be Joe Biden wins it. Which, first of all, let's be clear. A back-to-back sort of rematch election like this one maybe has happened, is it once ever? The last time it happened was in the 50s, was Eisenhower beating Adlai Stevenson. He beat him twice in the 50s, back to back.
Okay.
But point being, it's a very rare thing to happen in this country, right? I mean, we're going to see now as the debates happen, we're going to see people start to look at this election and see that it's Biden and Trump again, and so we'll see how they vote now that all of these things have been impacted. Hunter Biden, these indictments, at the end of the day, all of this is just adding on top of what happened to what was there with Donald Trump. And this was before January 6th. This election, the 2020 election, was before January 6th. So that's not even into account. From January 6th onward. Add that to what Trump had when he lost to Biden already. That's going to be a pretty big thing to point out to people in the middle, to Republicans in the middle as well. Who knows if they're gonna defect? But we've seen in the midterms a red wave was supposed to happen, and a red wave never came, right?
Except in New York.
Except in New York, yes. New York is a special case of ineptitude that you and I know all too well.
Yeah. But I wanted to say that I feel like, and I think that like the fact that we find ourselves, you and I, sitting here talking about the laptop, talking about what could have been, it's as if that this news cycle has sunk so deep into the political discourse that shouldn't, like, our main focus should try to be pull out of it, because I find myself consistently chasing these phantom arguments, these phantom talking points about the election being stolen, about a deep state thing, about a two-tier justice system, about, oh, let people decide at the ballot box whether Donald Trump is innocent or not. Have you been hearing, like, they're bringing that back again, like, oh, let people at the ballot box choose who the Supreme Court is going to be. But no one said let people at the ballot box choose whether Hillary Clinton is guilty or not. No one said that.
No, if we're going to talk about the media, I think it's very important to consider the corporate aspect of the mainstream media, and I think it's very important to consider the independent media that we have today and its effect on the mainstream media and the political landscape a little bit. I think it's clear to point out that a lot of these guys that we see that came up on when Tucker Carlson, I love to have said when Tucker Carlson had a show on Fox News. When he had a show on Fox News, he would bring these guys from the alt-right spaces on the internet, right, and on all over throughout. You would find on YouTube, you can find on Twitter, I don't know, on Rumble now, where I'm sure he's probably he has a show on Rumble now, right? Too, yeah, probably does.
I don't know. I have no idea. There's so many shows on Rumbles. I don't even like pay attention to it anymore.
He should have a show on Rumble. Rumble's an excellent streaming service.
Oh, is it?
If they pay me, it is. Hey, but they don't. So
they don't.
But yeah. Any case, that was a digression. But yeah, I think the independent media, the people who develop a lot of these things that Tucker Carlson finds, come from independent media. So so he gets these stories, he posts them online, and then these stories develop within the Republican and the alt-right and just the right-wing spaces. These become the talking points. They go they get to Fox News. When they get to Fox News now, then the Republicans in Congress, the politicians are going to look at it and they're going to say, oh, well, these are the things that the people that vote for me care about. These are the things that I have to keep doing if I want to stay in power. Right? Mm-hmm. These are the things I have to talk about if I want to stay in power. So this is what's happening, right? This is the power of the independent media.
I know today you sent me a message about a recent short that I published on YouTube about I wrote about independent media or indie media's role in or them fucking up. What did you exactly want to talk about in that regard?
Well, I think I was basically just typing you something that was getting long, and I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna just mention it maybe on the show. But I think you had made a point about how indie news had messed up, right? Had an opportunity, and I think indie news kind of fell due to its creation probably being mainly at the start. People who were either not actual journalists or either not actual journalists that didn't properly understand verifying their scoops, or at least were journalists or were people that valued the verification of their sources below making profit. And I think that it's about get the scoop first. It's about who's gonna get the news out first, right? Who's gonna break that story, and who's gonna make who's going to appeal to conservatives, who's going to appeal to Democrats, who's going to appeal to the Republicans that don't like Fox News, who's going to appeal to the Democrats that don't like CNN, who think CNN is too bland and not speaking to them. The pandemic, this was also a problem with regards to partisanship, being nonpartisan. A lot of these media sources, the Young Turks, these guys they're obviously not nonpartisan. These are clearly people with biases, and so what they say is going to have that bias, so you can't be trusted. So they can't necessarily be trusted by the majority. But the pandemic now, when the pandemic comes along, it gives these guys the perfect opportunity to prove their worth, you know, to prove that they have a chance now, because people are at home all day. They're not going anywhere. They're working from home. They're on their phones looking at Twitter, looking at all Facebook, social media, YouTube, what have you. They have more of a chance to look at your content now. And you have an election as well in between, which gives you a hotbed of content, right, to produce, you know. And they kind of just spiraled out of control. You know, a
They
lot of
did.
the right.
They really did. They really, really did.
They
I
really.
found like the vacuum, right? Because if we think back, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, they didn't really have online platforms. It was Vice and Vox,
Exactly.
and then Ben Shapiro and all these other little guys underneath,
The
and they kind of
Daily
became the
Wire, yeah.
pipeline for this new environment. And they I think they advertise themselves as not mainstream media, but what all they really did is not that much different than what I'm doing, right? I look at the news, I talk about it, I try to have conversations about it and react to it. But I find that the thing that I struggle with as well, myself, is this line between when do I jump on an issue? Because I know that if an issue happens that moment and then I make a stream about it, I get way more clicks as opposed to take my time and try to figure out what I'm actually talking about. And I get like 300, 400 views maybe on it. Right. So like,
Right. And this is how it works, right? This is the system for everybody. And I think one of the reasons why we had a big of a as big of a right wing kind of boom around like the 2010s and so on and so forth, when people really started to get into social media and YouTube and whatnot started to develop. I mean, Republicans were really big into kind of public talk radio, right?
mhm.
And that had a better
They've
that
always
had a
been though,
better
right? With Rush
evolution.
Limbaugh and Dennis Prager, my great uncle once,
Exactly.
twice removed. Um,
Yes, of course. The great Prager University,
mhm.
right?
He had a
University
talk
that
show,
does
right?
not teach fact or logic.
No, yeah, of course. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's an important thing to recognize that we think that that non-mainstream indie media is somehow delivering you things in a way that is not tainted by the mainstream, but it simply is a pipeline of mainstream ideas. It's a different way you're getting it, right?
Exactly. It's just it's that's a great way to put it. A pipeline of just of a mix of whatever. It's pop culture in your face, right? You got Ben Shapiro reacting to the Barbie movie, giving you his opinion on Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, and then on the other hand, telling you about how great it is, right? That that Donald Trump is is running for
Sticking it to the
president,
left.
has sticking it to the left, doing whatever. You know, this is what you're getting from these guys. You're getting everything under the sun. It's the YouTube is basically this. It's a similar platform to Twitter in that respect, in the way that you get content. Facebook, it's similar content. You know, you get YouTube videos posted on those places. You get clips of them, the shorts that you yourself have done. You know, those clips. They go on TikTok. They'll go on YouTube. They'll go. I spent the day. I spent my free time looking at a TikTok for so many hours, you know, that just got stuck in my head, of these two guys dancing, imitating, mocking European, like old European kind of like dance music, and it's
Hmm.
just hilarious. You know, this is what it's on these platforms, and that targets, you know what, that targets children, that targets children and every
I
demographic that
mean,
has embraced
the internet.
smartphones and the
Yeah,
internet since its
but that's
inception.
everyone. I mean, I'm sure your parents, my mom, fucking all day WhatsApp.
That's
in-
everyone.
It's everyone.
And you see it on Facebook, you'll see it. I had my aunt message me, or message in our family WhatsApp group, like a link to Candace Owens, that's her name, yeah, Candace
Yes.
Owens. Yeah, you know, and I was just like, what? Candace Owens from my aunt, I've never known to be political.
Hitler wasn't that bad, that's what Candace Owens says. It just, it was just the killing Jews part, not the hyper right wing nationalism, which says enough.
Says more than enough, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Well, we're really at the end of we're really at the end of the show, and I don't want us to lose this last thing. I want us to talk about, and then we'll move. Before we move to, do you have anything else you want to say about indie media or the candidates? I know we didn't get into as thorough as we wanted to.
I think
we can.
There are too many candidates, too much of a field for us to talk on all of them right now, unless we did a systematic breakdown of everyone and gave you the most basic information and didn't really have a chance to really talk about it. That's not how you would ever want to do things.
Well, we could watch a debate together. That would be fun.
Oh, we could absolutely.
That'd be good.
And we have some friends who I think would be amazing company for us on that.
Yeah, of course.
On a reaction to that. But yeah, if I want to leave anybody with one thing, I think this election is an election that every election is historic. I think every election in the MAGA era of this country is one worth following and worth paying attention to, because whether you like it or not, this is going to be a really big moment in American history and will be in textbooks, one way or another throughout, for the remainder of the existence of this country and maybe beyond that. That's how big this era of politics is in this country.
Yeah.
So, it's not the Civil War, but it's huge. So this is a great time. You're about to start hearing about these candidates more and more and more now as this month goes on. Then you'll have the first Republican primary debate towards the end of it, and you'll keep going. So stay tuned to that. Dandan will be here. I will probably be here alongside him a few more times. Yeah.
So before that,
let's talk about this and have some fun.
Let's watch this Trump guy realizes in the cult, and then we'll end the stream. I got to this thing through watching the Majority Report, because guess what? This is how the media pipeline works. I just want a quick PSA, which I always do quick PSAs. When you find something online, and if it's something that's big or it's a real fact, it's not just them watching a video, look it up. Quickly Google it. Google Fu is your friend. But other than
absolutely,
let's watch this guy.
You saw Barbie. You've been so
I mean, that's, yeah.
Oh my God, shut up, Majority Report.
We'd offer our own family more chances than we'd offer our own family members, for goodness sakes.
Oh boy.
And for what? To have Rudy Giuliani go down to Georgia and admit that he lied? Have Jason Miller tell the January 6th commission, yeah, we all knew it was BS. What is this? Some of you don't like it when I use the cult word, but when you like being treated like a schmuck and ask for more, that is a cult. I'm the mark. I'm the sucker. I want to be such. And I resent the person who tries to get me out of that. Those are marks of groupthink, frankly.
Wow.
How many people in this audience sent money to stop the steal 3 years ago? How many shows did I waste your time talking about this 3 years ago? How many? I still have not recovered between the election fraud and COVID. I probably have the smallest Facebook following of any major show in this entire...
Whatever. At this point, he just starts crying about the fact he doesn't have a big Facebook following. But, but that's the epitome of, I think, what this whole conversation was about. We're stuck talking about these nonsense talking points, right? Whether it was, Hunter Biden, it is Hunter Biden's laptop, the dumps, the election being stolen, the machines. We're consistently being put. I mean, wasn't it the tan suit during Obama's time? We have to really this is generally very irrelevant stuff. And if you're pulled down that rabbit hole and that's what you're thinking about and that's what you're obsessing about politically, realize that when I follow politics, that's the last stuff I care about. But it's the first stuff. But it's the first thing I hear about anytime I do engage in political discussion.
And that's kind of what I have treated kind of a lot of these independent media guys for, as people that kind of report on the culture war almost from a biased perspective. albeit, but they cover the culture war, which is something that I do kind of value as something to follow along with. But at the end of the day, doesn't impact the country on the scale of it's not a Ukraine Russia situation. It's not an economic crisis. It's nothing of the sort. It's not an attempted coup on 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 your own country to ensure you stay in power.
Which he just got indicted for, by the way. The
Yes,
DC
which is what
court
he got indicted for with the new one.
today, yeah. And
But
I
yeah,
think that's the biggest takeaway. I think that at least I'm stuck in a position where it's, do I make content that people watch, or do I make content that actually explores legitimate issues? And to balance that line is very difficult. It's very difficult.
absolutely. It's incredibly difficult. And election coverage, to be honest, is something that is a little bit of both, which is why it's kind of nice, because it's something that's very, very topical. People are very interested in listening to when the elections actually get going and are underway.
Mhm.
But are it's something that we just kind of it's yeah, I mean that's kind of what the point I was trying to make, I guess.
Yeah, it's important. Well, other than that, this is the end of our time. Of course, Raj, I thank you. I love you as always. I like talking about these issues.
Likewise, man.
And I think that like the main thing that everyone's watching should take away is pay attention. Try to sift the bullshit from the not bullshit. And most of these things that we talk about, whether it be CRT or trans issues or gay issues or Obama's tan suit or Hunter Biden's laptop or Hillary's emails, they're just, they disappear. Just try to think back. But all the bullshit things we've been talking about politically over the last 5 years, 6 years.
Year one of journalism school, they told us this story about post Katrina. There was this big story about how there were a ton of these dead bodies that were kept in a freezer within New Orleans, and it was talked about all over the, at least the state, and people were believed it. And then one day, some guy actually opened the freezer and saw it was empty. So, guys, open the freezer. look into the truth beyond what you're hearing. Understand what what the actual the verified legitimate sources say. Understand why they're verified and considered more legitimate, and then go from there.
Yeah. And as always, stay thinking.
Stay thinking.